If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 1, Unlimited Blade Works. This body is naturally born for the sword. Blood like steel, resolute and unyielding, heart like glass, fragile and delicate. Crossing countless battlefields, never defeated, yet never understood. So I stand atop the hill of swords, intoxicated by victory. Throughout my life, it is meaningless. This is Unlimited Blade Works. In the dormitory, Aelin opened his eyes and looked at the Zanpakuto lying on his knees. No, now this sword could already be called a Zanpakuto. Touching his Zanpakuto, Aelin's emotions were inexplicable. Aelin, in his past life, was an ordinary office worker, with anime and novels being his only hobbies. Perhaps it was a joke from some great existence. 30 years ago, Aelin reincarnated into the anime he once loved, and he also possessed spiritual pressure. At that time, thinking he was the protagonist, Aelin enthusiastically went through hardships from Rukanga and finally successfully joined the Shino Academy. Back then, Aelin was arrogant, thinking that as the protagonist, becoming a vice-captain in 3 years or a captain in 5 years, or even a captain in 100 years, wasn't too much to ask for. But unfortunately, during the 6 years at the Shino Academy, Aelin almost failed to pass the test of the 13th Division and almost became one of the countless cannon fodders in the Wandenreich Expeditionary Force. In the recent 100 years, the war between Seoul Society and the Wandenreich was intense, and the Wandenreich Expeditionary Force had become a real meat grinder. It was only because of Aelin's Shunpo proficiency that he was accepted by the 2nd Division's examiner. He never expected that, after 24 years of mediocrity, he would successfully conceive his own Zanpakuto. And because of his understanding of this ability, he didn't need the Zanpakuto to tell him its name and abilities. In the world of Shinigami, a name represented power. After the completion of the Zanpakuto's conception, Aelin's spiritual pressure also increased by 1 rank, currently at 5th rank Ryoryoku. Feeling the sudden surge of power, Aelin realized that even without releasing his Zanpakuto, he was already considered elite among the Godai. So, let's try my abilities in the Shinigami world and see how they differ from fate. Aelin placed his right hand on the hilt of his Zanpakuto, and a blue light emitted from his hand, forming blue patterns that covered his Zanpakuto. Identify the creation concept. Establish the basic framework. When these blue patterns completely covered his Zanpakuto, Aelin could feel the process of crafting a weapon in his mental world. With the light dissipating from his hand, Aelin entered his mental world. Grey earth, fiery red sky, and on the edge of the mental world, there were countless flames and rotating gears. Unlike the souls of other Zanpakuto, Aelin's Zanpakuto's mental world did not contain the manifestation of a Zanpakuto. Or rather, this entire space was the manifestation of Aelin's Zanpakuto. Extending his hand, blue spiritual power blossomed in Aelin's hand. Projection begin. In the next moment, a large amount of spiritual power, under Aelin's control, extended into the shape of a Zanpakuto, with blue patterns spreading across this blue spiritual Zanpakuto. Duplicate composition material. Imitate crafting techniques. Sympathize with growth experience. Reproduce accumulated years. Excel, complete various projects. The blue light dissipated, and Aelin's hand held another Zanpakuto. And the power of this Zanpakuto was exactly the same as his external Zanpakuto. With a wave of his hand, this Zanpakuto flew in the air for a few rounds and then inserted itself into the highest peak in this space. Under the red light of the sky, it cast a long shadow. Although he completed the conception of his Zanpakuto and achieved its first release, however, thinking of his Zanpakuto's ability and the situation encountered by a certain genius boy 200 years later, Aelin shook his head in the end. Seoul Society does not allow 2 identical Zanpakuto to appear. But with the ability of his Zanpakuto, it's more than just 2 identical ones, isn't it? Give me enough time, and mass-producing all the Zanpakuto appearing in Seoul Society is not a difficult task. If his abilities were known by those nobles, who knows how they would dispose of him. Before he grew up, it was better not to use the true ability of his Zanpakuto in front of outsiders. So, Aelin, in the 2nd Division, continued to slack off as usual. With tasks, he went on missions with his comrades, and without tasks, he trained in the 2nd Division's training ground. At night, he would also make the Zanpakuto he had recorded in his mental world. Aelin's Zanpakuto is called Unlimited Blade Works. But rather than blade works, it's more like blade creation. In this space, there are countless elements of swords. As long as Alan has the prototype of a sword, he can create a sword. Moreover, the swords created by Alan not only possess their own abilities but also the combat experience of their masters will be copied by Alan. In the current environment of Soul Society, Alan couldn't use the abilities of the swords he created, but the combat experience attached to these swords also greatly benefited Alan. With each additional Zanpakuto forged in Alan's unlimited blade works mental world, Alan's spiritual pressure would also increase accordingly. Alan was originally dragging the tail of the second division into the Godai, and it can be said that every Shinigami in the Godai was above Alan in strength. The stronger the Zanpakuto forged, the more Alan's spiritual pressure would increase. In just a few months, Alan's growth was several times greater than what he had achieved in his first 30 years. On this day, Alan had just finished forging a Zanpakuto in his mental world when he suddenly heard the sound of assembly. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of a wooden hammer hitting a wooden board, 3 consecutive knocks in a tight rhythm, this was the signal for an emergency mission. Without absorbing the experience in this Zanpakuto, Alan quickly put on his clothes. Wearing a black Shinigami uniform with a hood that only revealed his eyes, he looked like a ninja. Walking out of the dormitory, other ninjas similar to Alan hurriedly rushed to the assembly point of the Godai. Chapter 2, Mission. The Penal Force is a secret mobile unit of the 2nd Division, and also the strongest unit. Their main responsibilities include infiltration, assassination, execution, and other covert operations. Efficiency is paramount during their operations. Therefore, during operations, members of the Penal Force do not yell like members of other divisions. Instead, they are all stoically calm, uniformly orderly, almost like intricate machines. After joining the ranks, Alan quickly found his squad leader and followed behind him along with 3 other Shinigami from the same squad. Feeling an extra presence suddenly appear beside him, Kyuta Aokiji's mind shook. Which squad leader was this? Did they want to cooperate with his squad for the upcoming mission? A few seconds after the figure followed behind Kyuta Aokiji, he finally recognized that this guy was a member of his own squad. He was the one Kyuta Aokiji personally scouted from the Spiritual Arts Academy. However, what was going on here? If Kyuta Aokiji remembered correctly, during the last mission, Alan was no different from the other 3 members of his squad. But this time, he actually didn't sense Alan's presence until he had already approached. With just his hiding technique alone, Alan was already comparable to Kyuta Aokiji. Could Alan have improved this much in such a short period of time? Although filled with doubts, Kyuta Aokiji didn't say anything. They were a group of jackals lurking in the darkness, specifically handling Soul Society's ugly matters that couldn't see the light of day. As long as it didn't involve themselves, who would care about anything else? As the Godai 13 squad with one of the highest mortality rates, what they needed to do was survive mission after mission. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! One after another, black figures swiftly traversed the ups and downs of the 2nd Division barracks. Before the emergency assembly bugle had even finished sounding, the 5 regiments and 50 squads, 250 people of the Penal Force had already neatly gathered on the training grounds. Swish! The sound of breaking wind rang out. In the forefront of the 2nd Division training grounds, 2 figures suddenly appeared. One had long, purple hair and wore a yellow and black tank top with black pants. This was the captain of the 2nd Division, Yuryuki Shion. The other had messy, dull yellow hair and listless eyes, seemingly disinterested in everything. This was the current vice-captain of the 2nd Division as well as the captain of the detention unit, Kisokura Hara. With Alan's current abilities, he could only hear the sound of breaking wind after their appearance. Everyone, recently many souls have mysteriously disappeared from the Rukanga. The captain commander has ordered us to investigate the reason behind the disappearing souls as soon as possible. The 1st Regiment will be responsible for investigating the eastern districts of Rukanga. The 2nd Regiment will investigate the western districts. The 3rd Regiment will take the southern districts. The 4th Regiment will take the northern districts. The 5th Regiment will investigate the Siridii along with me. Yes. After receiving their assignments, everyone quickly turned into residual images and dashed towards their assigned areas using Shunpo. Alan was part of the 4th Regiment, so his squad was responsible for investigating the northern Rukanga districts. The Rukanga's 4 districts were each divided into 81 numbered districts. The further back the district number, the more chaotic it would be. Perhaps due to Alan's increased abilities, this time Kyuta Aokiji assigned Alan to investigate districts 61 and 62 of northern Rukanga. Compared to the districts near the Siraidii, housing conditions beyond District 60 had already become extremely dilapidated. Moreover, there were no fixed marketplaces here either. From time to time, fighting and killing broke out. Whoosh! Ailen's figure appeared in the shadows of a house corner. Fully concealing his Rasetsu, the people inside were completely unaware of the extra presence. After recording these people's Rasetsu, Ailen continued traversing Districts 61 and 62, documenting the Rasetsu of souls he came across. These tattered, skeletal souls wandering in Rukanga were obviously not the perpetrators behind the missing souls. But in the eyes of the real culprits, they were the most suitable souls to disappear. By recording their Rasetsu, Ailen could sense them within a certain range to determine their status. In Ailen's memory, the most prominent incident of souls mysteriously disappearing was when Aizen developed the Hagyaku. But clearly, the current timeline was off. Or perhaps, because this was the real world, Aizen had started his Hagyaku research even earlier than Ailen knew. Ailen focused his mind, extending his sensory abilities to their maximum limit. While sensing Rasetsu around him, he also contemplated the root cause behind this incident. During his 30 years in Soul Society, Ailen had roughly figured out what point in the timeline he was at. It was around 200 years before the Bleach storyline would kick off. The 2nd Division Captain was still Yoriuki Shion, the 3rd Division Captain was still RJR Odoribashi, the 5th Division Captain was still Shinji Hirako, the 7th Division Captain was still Love Aikawa, the 9th Division Captain was still Kensei Maguruma, the 10th Division Captain was Shiba Ishin, the 11th Division Captain was Syaken Peiki, and Jaishur Yukitake was still the 13th Division Captain. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Ailen's mind. Before Aizen, Kisuke Urahara had already succeeded in creating an incomplete Hagyaku. Could the current incident of disappearing souls have been caused by Urahara's machinations? Captain Yoriuki had mobilized the entire 2nd Division for such a large-scale investigation of Rukanga districts while she and Urahara were personally investigating Siraidii. Were they trying to cover things up for Urahara? Come to think of it, why were those Central 46 nobles so certain over 100 years later that the holification experiments were Urahara's doing? The only possibility was that Urahara had prior offenses. At this thought, Ailen's figure halted for a moment. Forget it, I'm too small a fry to know or handle these sorts of matters. Just focus on my own duties. No longer thinking about it, Ailen continued recording Rasetsu and moving unpredictably through the 2 districts he was responsible for. If he sensed any Rasetsu disappearances, Ailen would definitely release a signal and immediately flee the area. He had only just obtained powers that could be considered supreme. How could he resign himself to dying here? Fortunately, this situation persisted until the mission ended without any abnormalities occurring in Ailen's assigned districts. Afterwards, the 2nd Division returned to its former tranquility. Ailen also resumed his daily routine of copying other Shinigami's Zanpakuto at the training grounds during the day. At night after returning to the barracks, he would enter his inner world and forge the Zanpakuto copies made during the day. Moreover, by absorbing the battle experience of these Zanpakuto wielders, his own strength gradually increased. Chapter 3, The Incident of the Mysterious Bat Blade. Huff. Huff huff. Huff. In the training grounds of the 2nd Division, Ailen held his Zanpakuto and concentrated on practicing. If one observed closely, they would notice Ailen's current training was very similar to one particular person among the trainees. This was because the Zanpakuto Ailen was wielding wasn't his own, but one he had projected from his inner world. By grasping this Zanpakuto, Ailen obtained all the experience of its original wielder. However, this experience only appeared in Ailen's mind when he held the projected Zanpakuto. Ailen was confident he could stalemate the original owners of these copied Zanpakuto in a short amount of time. After all, their opponent wasn't someone else, but themselves. Yet Ailen wasn't satisfied with just stalemating others. He trained even harder to convert their experience into further progress for himself. Hakuta, Zanjutsu, Shunpo, Kid. Every Shinigami of the Penal Force had mastered some killer moves or practical tricks in the 4 Shinigami combat forms that they had immersed in for decades or even centuries. One's weakness could very well be another's greatest strength. Every period of training, Ailen would sheath his sword and secretly activate his Shikai to project the Zanpakuto of others, then practice and grasp their trump cards. When these individuals' experiences were completely absorbed by Ailen alone, how much stronger would he become? No one knew. Even Ailen himself was somewhat unclear of his current standing. But what he could confirm was that Kyuta, his former squad leader whom he once viewed as quite strong, now posed not even the slightest threat. Moreover, Kyuta was considered one of the stronger squad leaders of the penal force. According to Kyuta's drunken ramblings one time, he had almost become the 20th seat of the 2nd Division. Aside from the captain and vice-captain, each division also had 17 seated officers to assist in managing squad affairs, ranking from 3rd seat down to 20th. The 20th seat was the lowest ranked seat. These seated members were generally assigned based on individual strength. After all, if one's abilities were inferior and they suffered a defeat in front of everyone, the victor would replace their seated position. Although the 2nd Division had 4 subunits, the penal force was undeniably the strongest. The other divisions weren't completely devoid of powerful members either, but at most they only had a few vice-unit leaders and squad leaders. Aelin guessed that even accounting for Kyuta's potential bragging, his strength could at least rank in the top 50 of the 2nd Division. As someone even stronger than Kyuta now, Aelin may have truly brushed shoulders with the seated officers. Thump thump thump. Just as Aelin and the others were engrossed in training, the 2nd Division's emergency assembly bugle sounded again. But this time, not everyone gathered at the training grounds. Hundreds of hell butterflies had flown above the 2nd Division barracks, stopping nearby. Aelin extended his left hand and a hell butterfly perched on his forefinger. After obtaining the information stored within through some method, Aelin didn't dare to delay and swiftly rushed towards the noble estates in Siraidii as instructed. According to the intelligence from the hell butterfly, it seemed the upper noble Kashomiji clan had suffered an attack and urgently required Shinigami reinforcements. The Kashomiji clan. Following the hell butterfly's guidance, Aelin sped towards the Kashomiji clan while recalling in his mind whether this mobilization corresponded to any events from his memory. If I'm not mistaken, the Kashomiji clan should be the family that created the Bat Blades but ultimately lost to Etsunomiya due to a slight misstep, failing to advance to the royal palace. Right. Also, the Bat Blades can directly grant the user tremendous power just by providing Ryoryoku. Even someone who has achieved Shikai would not necessarily defeat a Bat Blade wielder. Although lacking a Shikai or Bankai like Zanpakuto, every Bat Blade also possessed unique abilities. Anyone could use them as long as they offered Ryoryoku. They could be considered iron Bat Blades wielded by ever-changing Shinigami. The Kashomiji clan in possession of Bat Blades had steadily maintained the strength of over 20 seated officers. For such a powerful family to actually suffer an invasion? And even require Godei 13 reinforcements? Preposterous. However, despite his doubts, Aelin did not hesitate one bit. Boom! 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 As Aelin progressed ahead, he could already sense the Ryutsu of those battling up front. There, dozens of individuals with intensely chaotic Ryutsu were fighting someone with a slightly more explosive Ryutsu. From Aelin's perception, the group with greater numbers was actually at a disadvantage instead. Additionally, there were 4 or 5 other battlefields with multiple chaotic Ryutsu fighters besieging those with pure Ryutsu. However, the chaotic Ryutsu side held the upper hand at those other fronts. Could those chaotic Ryutsu signals be the Kashomiji clan's Bat Blade warriors? One reason the Bat Blades were eliminated by Etsunomiya's Zanpakuto was due to their lower strength ceiling compared to Zanpakuto. The second reason was the Bat Blade's lack of a Ryoryoku safety valve while absorbing energy. During battles, Bat Blade users could channel their own Ryoryoku into the weapon to obtain even greater power. But when their Ryoryoku grew insufficient, they would be completely devoured by the Bat Blade instead. Utilizing these weapons demanded tremendous courage. Generally speaking, the warriors who used Kashomiji clan Bat Blades were all cultivated by the family itself. Their creed was men may die, blades must not be lost. If any warriors perished in combat, their Bat Blades would be recovered by other warriors. The Kashomiji clan's Bat Blades had never been misplaced since first being forged. Whoosh whoosh. Over a dozen Shinigami dressed like ninjas also followed behind Aelin. Soon though, these Shinigami split into small teams heading towards different battle zones. Those more confident in themselves rushed over to the most intense fighting arena. As for Aelin, he went with 3 others towards one of the lesser battlegrounds. Based on the Ryutsu fluctuations there, even if his opponents were stronger than himself, it wouldn't be by much and was still within his capability to handle. The fighters at the main battlefield were firmly at vice-captain class from what Aelin could sense right now. But he suspected the encircled individual had yet to use full force. After all, anyone audacious enough to cause trouble for the Kashomiji clan surely possessed more than just this bit of power. Aelin wouldn't even be surprised if that person activated Bankai later. Chapter 4, First Encounter with Bankai. Whoosh! With Alan's group's speed, in just a few dozen seconds, they had already arrived at a small battlefield. At this small battlefield, there were 5 people holding strange weapons surrounding and attacking a Shinigami wearing a shiakush. What made the weapons in the hands of the 5 people strange was that the hilts of these weapons did not have cross guards, but rather something resembling octopus tentacles. Moreover, these octopus tentacles seemed alive as they writhed along the 5 people's right hands and plunged into their arms. The reason Alan felt their Ryutsu was chaotic was that part of the Ryutsu from these people's bodies came from the blades they wielded. Bat blades. The weapon held by the Shinigami they surrounded was a spear. Generally, the weapons of Shinigami were Zanpakuto blades. However, every Shinigami could merge their soul with an Asachi through Zanpakuto to give birth to a Zanpakuto unique to themselves. By calling out their Zanpakuto's name, a Shinigami could obtain its power. Usually, after releasing their Shikai, a Zanpakuto's shape and abilities would undergo changes. Clearly, this Shinigami was a powerful warrior capable of releasing his Shikai. One could tell how strong this Shinigami was from how bolts of lightning shot out from the tip of his spear each time he swung it, knocking down the warriors besieging him. Yet after the fallen warriors channeled Ryoryoku into their bat blades, they quickly recovered and stood up again to continue surrounding and attacking this Shinigami. Are you reinforcements from the Godi I-13? Please assist us in capturing this criminal. Upon seeing Alan's group arrive, one of the warriors immediately asked them for help. Although they saw that their opponent was a fellow Shinigami, the orders received by the penal force for this mission were to assist the Kashomiji clan in suppressing the attackers. Hence, Alan and the others had no choice but to unsheath their Zanpakuto from their waists and charge at the Shinigami. Seeing Alan's group approach, this Shinigami's movements visibly paused for a moment. However, after Alan's group joined the battle, he did not show any mercy. The spear-wielding youth effortlessly parried Alan's group's joint attack. Sensing the power behind the blows of the youth's spear, Alan's whole body shuddered as a tremendous force was transmitted through the spear, forcing his body to involuntarily retreat backwards. Not good. Having just been pushed back, Alan immediately saw a flash of blue light. In that instant, Alan didn't bother considering anything else and hastily stretched out his empty left hand, placing the back of his hand facing outwards. Bakud number 8, Repulse. A transparent barrier emerged before the back of Alan's outstretched hand. The next moment, an attack arrived. After repelling the incoming Shinigami, the youth let out a loud shout as blue lightning crackled along his spear. Lightning strike! Boom! Following the youth's swing, the lightning instantly transformed into dozens of thunderbolts, bombarding everyone present. Boom! Struck by this lightning, the other warriors were instantly gravely injured. On Alan's side, because he had unleashed Bakud number 8 beforehand to block the lightning for an instant, the barrier was only shattered after the lightning's power had weakened somewhat. Thud! Capitalizing on the moment the 8th binding spell barricaded the lightning, Alan executed his own response. Projection Sword Shield. Blue spiritual power coalesced before Alan, condensing into over a dozen swords that combined to form a shield made of blades. As long as it was a weapon from his unlimited blade works, Alan only needed to expend some Ryoryoku to project it into the real world. However, because they were just projections of the weapons from his inner world, their rank was one level lower than the originals inside unlimited blade works. Boom! The lightning collided with the sword shield, shattering over half of it after its power was reduced from destroying one kid spell. Only then did the remaining energy completely dissipate. Riding on the aftermath, Alan was pushed back some more distance before firmly stopping himself. Seeing that Alan was the only one left standing from the group, the youth had wanted to continue his attack. But the Kashomiji clan's bat blade warriors, empowered by their weapons, quickly recovered and rejoined the encirclement. Witnessing this scene, Alan was in no hurry to participate in the encirclement. Instead, he rushed over to one of his comrades, placing his hands above the Shinigami's body as blue light radiated from them. Healing Kid. Among Alan's numerous copied Zanpakuto were several penal force members well versed in healing spells. After assimilating their experiences, Alan was now comparable to anyone in recuperative kid. Thanks bro, I'll treat you to drinks after we're done with this mission. Sounds good. Please go distract him for now while I heal the others. Got it. Next, after successively treating his other injured comrades, Alan assumed the role of battlefield medic. The Kashomiji clan's warriors had their bat blades to recuperate. Alan's healing kid supported his injured 2nd Division allies. After a dozen or so minutes, 3 of the Kashomiji clan's warriors had died while 3 of the 5 2nd Division members were heavily injured, drastically decreasing their combat power. However, this youth was also barely holding on. Kill. In another wave of attacks, substantial auras of Ryoryoku emerged from the bodies of the Kashomiji warriors. The tentacles of their bat blades had now crept past their necks to their chests and below. At this state, although a bat blade warrior was still weaker than the youth, the gap had narrowed significantly. Soon, several more wounds appeared on the youth's body. Just when it seemed the youth could no longer endure, Aelin suddenly sensed an overwhelmingly powerful Ryotsu rapidly approaching them. Sensing the impending danger, he immediately grabbed one heavily injured Shinigami onto his back while holding the other 2 injured in his hands and fled the battlefield as swiftly as he could. Boom! In the distance, a tremendous fiery explosion sent Aelin's group flying violently through the air. Cough, damn, did they lose control of the main battlefield? To actually let that person charge over here instead. Clambering up from the ground, Aelin felt his entire body aching. Looking back, he saw a man walking out from the raging flames. In his hand was an enormous curved blade with a crimson groove running through its center. Strands of fire burned within this indentation on the massive sword. The surrounding air warped and rippled from the scorching high temperature. At the same time, the Ryotsu emanating from this man's entire body made Aelin feel as if he were submerged in the ocean depths. Simply moving was already difficult, let alone breathing, that seemed nothing more than wishful thinking. Captain class. This is undoubtedly the Ryotsu of a captain. Moreover, from the state of his Zanpakut, he has clearly activated his Bankai. Chapter 5, Shinetsu Kisaragi. Bleach. This anime was an extremely popular series in Aelin's previous life. Together with 2 other anime, it was known as one of the big 3 shonen manga. Based on the powers displayed by characters in the anime, there were roughly a few levels: Ordinary Division Shinigami, Elite Division Shinigami, Seated Officers, Vice Captains, Captains, Centuries-Old Captains, the Captain Commander, and the Soul King. Division Shinigami were those who had just graduated from the Shin Academy with exceptional results and been recruited by the Godi I-13. Elite Division Shinigami were those who had been Shinigami for over a decade and possessed their own specialties among the 4 Shinigami combat forms of Hakuda, Zanjutsu, Shunpo, and Kid. Seated officers were the elite forces within each division. At the very least, one needed to reach 5th seat class Ryoryoku and successfully manifest their Zanpakutos initial release to become a seated officer. Vice captains had 3rd seat class Ryoryoku and were the strongest in their division aside from the captain. Captains were already considered big shots in the entirety of Soul Society. Centuries-old captains didn't simply refer to captains who had held their position for over 100 years. Rather, it meant their Shikai was powerful enough to rival the Bankai of ordinary captains. As for their Bankai, ordinary captains were no different from cannon fodder before them. The captain commander referred to Genrisai Shigakuni Yamamoto. His level could be described with just 2 words: blazingly invincible. As for those even higher like the Soul King, they could no longer be described by the realm of power and instead occupied the position as the cornerstone of the world. With each increasing level, the disparity in strength grew exponentially. Take the captain and vice captain levels for example. Although they seemed only 1 level apart, if a captain-level combatant fully exerted their Ryotsu, even breathing would become extremely difficult for a vice-captain-level person. Just like Aelin's current predicament when faced with the man before him. The billowing Ryotsu submerged Aelin like the surging tides. Focusing his mind, Aelin silently chanted an incantation. A few seconds later, a diamond-shaped glow manifested between his hands. Bakud number 63, Mirror Door. Next, the glowing barrier morphed into a transparent wall that shielded Aelin's group. Mirror Door was a high-level barrier capable of reflecting external attacks. With its protection, the pressure brought about by the overbearing Ryotsu instantly vanished. Roar roar roar! The fiery flames within the indentation of the man's Zanpakut raged violently as his explosive Ryotsu battered against Aelin's barrier, causing creaking sounds as if it would shatter in the next second under the pressure. Aelin was also helpless to do anything. This was already the strongest defensive method in his current arsenal. Yet before a true captain-level opponent, it was clearly lacking. Just now, this guy had effortlessly wiped out all the warriors encircling that youth with one swing. If he turned his blade towards Aelin and his comrades, their ending likely wouldn't be too pleasant either. Fortunately, the man only gave them a glance after instructing the youth for a bit before swiftly heading towards the next battlefield. The heavily injured Shinigami had also quickly left after the youth's departure. Phew! Seeing the two figures leave, Alan finally breathed a sigh of relief. He had picked back up his little life. And even obtained an unexpected opportunity to encounter two powerful Zanpakuto. One of them had even attained Bankai. After this mission, he would forge replicas of the two Zanpakuto in unlimited blade works. For the remainder of the time, Alan busied himself healing the three heavily injured people around him with Kid instead of rushing off towards other battlefields. With that monster present, Alan would have to be insane to go court death. Furthermore, judging from the emergency summons order today, something shady was clearly going on behind the scenes. Normally, when a noble clan was attacked, reinforcements would definitely include a captain at the minimum, if not the vice-captain taking the lead. Yet for this incident, Alan and the others had only received notifications via hell butterflies. Nearly an hour had passed since the fighting started, but Alan still hadn't seen any captains, vice-captains, or even seated officers from the 2nd Division around. Evidently, the backup mobilized through hell butterfly notifications only consisted of bottom-rung Shinigami like themselves. Alan refused to believe the Godai 13 higher UPS wouldn't sense Rasetsu at the captain level flaring. So why hadn't a single one of them shown up? Clearly, underlying interests between nobility were involved at the upper echelons. Meanwhile, they were merely a batch of disposable cannon fodder thrown out. Perhaps this was also deliberately staged for those nobles to see. Look, despite our Godai 13 not sending any captains or vice-captains, we still sacrificed so many troops just to provide assistance to your Kashomiji clan. The fighting went on for almost an hour. In the end, after wrecking sufficient chaos, the man behind the attack on the Kashomiji clan suddenly experienced an explosive surge in his Rasetsu. He then directly charged towards the 1st Division barracks. It was there Alan witnessed firsthand a tiny glimpse of the strongest Shinigami's true power. The blazing flames blotting out the skies of Siritii and the overwhelming Rasetsu blanketing the entire city far outstripped the captain-level pressures Alan had experienced before. It was simply incomparable. In the next few days, Alan eventually learned through certain channels about Central 40SIX's verdict on handling this matter. The Shinigami who attacked the Kashomiji clan that day was someone named Shinetsu Kisaragi. Through unknown means, Shinetsu Kisaragi discovered the Kashomiji clan had weapons able to enhance strength. Hence, he led a number of close aids to raid Kashomiji territory, seizing one of their powerful bat blades and experiencing a substantial boost in power. Augmented by the bat blade, Shinetsu Kisaragi directly assaulted the 1st Division and ambushed Captain Commander Yamamoto. In the end, he was effortlessly defeated by Yamamoto but managed to successfully flee from the Captain Commander. Soon after though, investigators from the 1st Division discovered Shinetsu Kisaragi's corpse dumped in a certain spot of the Rukanga. Thus, this incident of the Kashomiji clan under attack was concluded. However, unlike the others, Alan's personal deduced perspective on this matter differed. Shinetsu Kisaragi. While others may not recognize him, Alan knew him to be one of Captain Commander Yamamoto's disciples. His intrusion into the Kashomiji clan had nothing to do with trying to seize strength from bat blades. Rather, in the process of researching bat blades, the Kashomiji clan had secretly captured large numbers of wandering souls in Rukanga to test the weapon's performance. Because they were a prominent noble family, the Godai 13 as the military force protecting Soul Society had absolutely no jurisdiction to enforce laws over the nobility. Yet Shinetsu Kisaragi, as a native of Rukanga, naturally could not bear to watch the Kashomiji clan slaughter many wandering souls. Thus, he infiltrated the Kashomiji clan with several fellow companions from Rukanga, aiming to uncover evidence of the clan wantonly massacring Rukanga souls so they could petition Central 46 to launch an investigation on the Kashomiji clan. Chapter 6, The Essence of Power. However, Shinetsu Kisaragi had clearly underestimated the defensive might of the Kashomiji clan. After sneaking into the clan's territory, their group of 5 was swiftly discovered. While Shinetsu Kisaragi might have fled under the warriors' assault, his companions would have become the Kashomiji clan's captives. To rescue his comrades, Shinetsu Kisaragi had no choice but to reveal his true strength and fight his way into the Kashomiji clan's base. Yet Shinetsu Kisaragi still underestimated the prowess of the Kashomiji warriors. Although the Kashomiji clan had no one who could match Shinetsu Kisaragi, they possessed even more sinister bat blades. After over 20 warriors had perished, the Kashomiji clan's remaining fighters finally managed to shove a powerful bat blade into Shinetsu Kisaragi's hands. The bat blades were weapons the Kashomiji clan had forged through unique methods. They once competed with Asachi to become the Shinigami's standard armaments. But due to their overly malicious side effects, the bat blades were rejected in the end. When dealing with Shinetsu Kisaragi, the Kashomiji clan had staked everything by taking out the strongest bat blade in their possession. This bat blade that the Kashomiji clan had sealed away for hundreds of years naturally wouldn't let slip an opportunity upon encountering someone with Shinetsu Kisaragi's immense Ryuryoku reserves. Thus, the rampaging Shinetsu Kisaragi fell. Nearly all his Ryuryoku was drained by the bat blade and he collapsed within the Kashomiji clan's territory. In the end, while fully commandeered by the Kashomiji clan's bat blade, Shinetsu Kisaragi was manipulated into charging at the first division and slashing at his own teacher. Everyone believed this incident had concluded at that point. Yet Aelin was aware that this matter's aftermath also marked the start of the Kashomiji clan's decline. Over 200 years later in the future, the Kashomiji clan heiress had nearly lost the entire family to a treacherous vassal. If not for Shinetsu Kisaragi's son who changed his name to Tsukumagai 200 years later to take revenge on Captain Commander Yamamoto by embroiling Kurosaki Ichigo and friends, the Kashomiji clan might have truly fallen. During this period, Aelin had successfully forged replicas of both Shinetsu Kisaragi's Zanpakuto and the youth's spear. Substantially reinforced by their power, Aelin's own strength rose tremendously. Especially after manifesting Shinetsu Kisaragi's Zanpakuto, a Bankai-wielding blade, the feedback elevated Aelin's Ryuryoku all the way to 3rd seat class. In other words, vice captain level. Boom! Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Boom boom boom! Beneath the fiery red sky, hundreds of swords rained down under Aelin's manipulation, crashing thunderously into the earth and detonating with tremendous force. Along with Aelin's soaring power, the projectile speed and might of these swords had also increased significantly. From what he could tell, the damage inflicted by each sword when it smashed into the ground was now comparable to a level 30 had spell. In other words, Aelin's single attack just now was equivalent to simultaneously unleashing hundreds of had number 30 spells. At most, only around 100 individuals in the entirety of Soul Society could safely withstand such an onslaught. And that was with Aelin generously counting those hidden guards of noble families. With my current abilities, I should rank among the stronger vice-captains. Within his inner world, Aelin nodded in satisfaction at the destruction caused by his move just now. Next, Aelin shifted his gaze towards the sword hill on the other side. Right now, 15 blades were stabbed into that hilltop. At the very center stood Aelin's own Zanpakuto, Unlimited Blade Works. One level below was Shinetsu Kisaragi's recently forged sword. Another dozen or so blades were scattered midway up the hill. Compared to Shinetsu Kisaragi's Zanpakuto, these 13 swords were far more inferior. But the fact that they could be mounted onto the hill was proof that none of them were ordinary. And that was indeed the case. Every single one of those 13 swords had achieved initial release. However, due to Soul Society's rules, the replicas produced by Aelin had to remain concealed. Just over 200 years later, 2 individuals possessing identical Zanpakuto would warrant an execution order from Central 46 towards one of them. If it was exposed that Aelin had multiple copies of others' Zanpakuto, wouldn't it be a given that either Aelin and those swords' original owners had to die? Come that time, would there even be a need to consider whether it was them or Aelin who died? Even if Central 46 members were all pig brains, they wouldn't tolerate Aelin's limitless potential to grow. From Shinetsu Kisaragi's example, Aelin understood that if he wanted to swiftly amass power and stand on equal ground with the Godai 13 captains, that was the optimal approach. After all, every time he produced a captain-class Zanpakuto, his Ryuryoku obtained an exponential boost. Just now, Shinetsu Kisaragi's blade had forcefully propelled Aelin's Ryuryoku from being on the cusp of 4th seat class all the way to 3rd seat class. However, given Aelin's current penal force identity, he had to be ready on standby in the barracks at all times in case an emergency summons came down. Those who were absent without leave when an urgent mission notification arrived definitely wouldn't receive leniency from the detention unit just because they were from the 2nd Division. Otherwise, Aelin would have snuck out long ago to randomly traverse Siridi and copy the Zanpakuto of any Shinigami he encountered before returning to manifest them in Unlimited Blade Works. If I want to get close with those big shots, I'll need to raise my status and abilities. While my power is now about on par with vice-captains from other divisions, the tricky part is how do I explain my Zanpakuto's capabilities to others. Staring at the hundreds of blades in his inner world, Aelin lowered his head deep in contemplation. At a certain moment, inspiration suddenly flashed across Aelin's mind. That's right. My Zanpakuto's power is Unlimited Blade Works. More accurately speaking, it should be called Unlimited Arms Works. I cannot expose the Zanpakuto from Soul Society. But if I can produce weapons from other realms, then there's no issue using them here. Thrilled by this realization, Aelin's heart instantly fired up. Men would forever remain boys at heart. After watching so much anime and reading countless novels, which guy didn't harbor fantasies about divine weapons? Even if he couldn't wield them externally, simply messing around with those arms in his inner world would still be exhilarating. Hence, Aelin immediately began gathering the sword elements in his inner world based on mental impressions alone to craft those weapons deeply engraved in his memories. Identify creation concept. Establish basic framework. Innumerable blue lights glittered within the unlimited blade works dimension as all sorts of armaments emerged from Aelin's mental landscape over the passage of time. If any otaku were to witness the weapons currently inside Aelin's inner world, they would surely yell out WTF in shock. Chapter 7, The First Successfully Forged Sword, Tessaiga. Although all swords, the hundreds of weapons materializing along with the dissipating blue lights were each unique. Tessaiga, Tenseiga, Daki, Tokaijin, Bakusaiga. Hitokiri Batsai, Jigoku no Sada Mo Kakuru Michi. The Interpreter, the Pursuer of Darkness, Sky Piercer, Blue Rose Sword, Golden Osmanthus Sword, Heaven Piercer, Time Piercer. Kokut, Ace, Murakumo, Griffin, First Generation Quincy Cross, Wabisuk, Akatsuki. Ga with Macron and Zhang, Mo Yet, Sword in the Stone, Durandal, Spiral Sword, Object, Primal Fire, Wheel of Fortune Interval. Only when Aelin's Ryuryoku was completely drained did the lingering blue radiance finally fade with no more weapons manifesting. Soon, the tremendous amount of swords forged this time prompted a feedback response from his unlimited blade works ability. However, contrary to Aelin's expectations, the gains he received from producing hundreds of arms from other realms was merely on par with the boosts from copying ordinary Shinigami Zanpakuto. Although his Ryuryoku increased slightly, it was vastly disproportionate to the capabilities displayed when creating these weapons. Sensing the abnormal feedback, Aelin opened his eyes. What he saw was the hundreds of swords he just produced scattered sparsely across the plain lands of his inner world. Not a single one was stabbed into the Sword Hill. Aelin was very cognizant about his own powers. The Sword Hill was the sole high ground in this inner dimension. Only formidable blades were qualified to be mounted onto that hill. As a bare minimum, they had to be capable of initial release. Other sealed Zanpakuto could only be planted on the flat plains. It was impossible for them to pierce into the hillside. Take for example the hundreds of Shinigami Zanpakuto Aelin had copied previously. Only around a dozen managed to make it onto the Sword Hill. Yet now, not one of the hundreds of conjured fantasy weapons could even stick into the mound? How reasonable was that? Stepping forward and resting his hand on one sword's hilt, realization instantly dawned on Aelin. When Aelin had forged Shinigami Zanpakuto in the past, he would first successfully copy another person's manifested Zanpakuto blade externally before producing it within his inner world of unlimited blade works. As a result, the replicated Zanpakuto he created were naturally complete. Identify creation concept. Establish basic framework. Duplicate composition material. Imitate crafting techniques. Sympathize with growth experience. Reproduce accumulated years. Not a single step was missing from the 6 manufacturing phases. Yet for the weapons Aelin had just constructed relying solely on memories, only the initial 2 steps of identifying concepts and establishing structures were performed. Everything afterwards like material properties, production methods, maturation experience, and aged accumulation was non-existent. Thus, intrinsically hollow shells were all these conjured arms from other worlds amounted to presently, devoid of any soul. That explained why when Aelin grabbed the sword hilt earlier he didn't obtain its original master's experiences at all. No wonder the increases were so insignificant despite exhausting tremendous Ryuryoku to generate hundreds of blades this time. Given their shoddy quality, it was already impressive they could match the capabilities of Aelin's replicated Zanpakuto, that was indicative of the personal insights he had developed recently towards sword forging. Clang! Unsheathing the blade in his hand and swinging it around a few times, Aelin shook his head. These swords were nothing more than empty forms without substance. For the next stretch of time, apart from occasional missions where he would sneak some slack, Aelin immersed himself within unlimited blade works to research methods of manifesting those fantasy world swords stored in his mind. As a dimension containing the embodiment of all sword elements, his inner world held the potential to completely construct any blade as long as Aelin possessed its template. What Aelin presently sought to produce were swords existing solely as memories. He would then have to gather the appropriate elements based on those recollections to fabricate new weapons. This was an arduous undertaking. Even Alan was uncertain how much time he needed to succeed in fully materializing just one sword. Thus, he opted for the very first fantasy series that roped him into the otaku world, Inuyasha. After countless attempts, Alan finally made substantial progress. Blue light coalesced in his palm as azure veins edged out a weapon's shape. Buzz! At this moment, the Shinetsu Kisaragi blade stabbed atop the sword hill abruptly discharged a blaze. This fiery stream directly infused itself into the sword Alan was forging. When the blue radiance dispersed, what remained in Alan's hand was a seemingly worn and damaged sword covered in jagged, sawtooth-like gaps along its very edge, even the blade itself. The Tessagah! It worked! Seeing the completed sword form, elation flashed across Alan's eyes. Unlike the other inferior products, this Tessagah now contained a consciousness. Alan immediately ignored his present exhausted state and immersed his psyche completely into the Tessagah's memories. After quite a while, he finally opened his eyes and sighed, torn between satisfaction and discontent. He was gratified because this Tessagah genuinely harbored the experiences of a certain half-demon. Yet he also felt dissatisfied since the Tessagah was essentially still half-finished. Other than the giant transformation, the only special move it possessed was the wind scar. None of the techniques like the adamant barrage or Miad Zangzuha were present. However, unlike its missing red dragon scale patterns and traits, this Tessagah at least had access to its flame form transformation for the time being. That was because according to Alan's recollections, the Tessagah should have a flaming shape. Hence, during the forging process, a portion of the fire elemental power from Shinetsu Kisaragi's Zanpakuto atop the hill had flown in to complement the Tessagah's flame form. So that's why. Upon realizing all this, pleasant surprise welled up within Alan's heart. As it turned out, the weapons he had already manufactured would provide assistance when he forged new arms. If this trend held true, then the more Zanpakuto he copied, the easier it would become down the line to construct otherworldly weapons, right? For instance, if he duplicated Tobium from the Bleach universe, would there still be any difficulty creating its first-level Surekill, Muramasa? Chapter 8, Shaolin Fon. What if he copied Sodi no Shirayuki or Haranmaru? Would there be any difficulty in producing a noble phantasm-like demonic essence of Crimson Dreams? If he copied Ichigo Kurosaka's Zangetsu and Kenpei Kizaraki's Nozarashi, would the resulting Kokut, Yora be able to cleave apart mountains? After duplicating Benihime, forging Tenza Zangetsu, what effects would that yield? Thinking to this point, Alan's heart blazed with fervor. Moreover, for Alan who had already produced Tessagah, he no longer minded revealing his Zanpakuto's capabilities externally. As long as identical Zanpakuto to those in Bleach didn't appear in his own hands, what issue was there even if everyone knew his power was blade forging? Once he copied even more Zanpakuto and elevated his strength beyond the levels of Yamamoto and Hikifune, what harm would there be in exposing his ability to produce identical Zanpakuto then? After exiting his inner world, Alan enjoyed a nice long sleep. The next day after getting up, Alan tidied himself before heading towards the 2nd Division Captain's office. The 13 court guard squads were essentially military forces built on might makes right. What it abided by was the law of the jungle, the strong reign supreme while the weak are downtrodden. Even for the position of captain, as long as one could defeat the incumbent before over 200 division members, the seat would belong to the victor. The captain was the undisputed strongest of a squad. For Alan to obtain freedom of movement, all he needed was to exhibit his power. Challenging and defeating seated officers to become one himself was the most direct and effective method. During this period, Alan had already singled out his target, the 2nd Division Vice-Captain and head of the low-ranking noble family Mada, Marino Shinmada. Marino Shinmada's abilities were certainly deserving of his post. Just like contending for the captain's seat, any challenge towards seated officers also required sufficient witnesses present and the captain's acknowledgement for it to be valid. While walking forwards, Alan smoothly arrived outside the 2nd Division Captain's quarters. However, beyond Alan's expectations, the only person inside the office was a short-haired young girl appearing to be 11 or 12 meticulously poring through documents. She would occasionally jot something down in those folders. Despite this being their first encounter, Alan was quite familiar with the girl's identity. The next family head of the declining lower noble Fon clan and 2nd Division Captain after the defections of Yoryuki Shion and Kisuke Urahara, Swa Fon. Naturally, before inheriting her family's leadership, this girl before Alan wasn't called Swa Fon yet. Instead, she was known as Shaolin Fon. Leave any documents over here first. I'll check them after finishing up with these. Hearing Ailin's footsteps, Shaolin Fon assumed someone had delivered some division reports. Thus, she casually spoke up while remaining focused on the documents before her. Each squad had daily administrative duties for the captain to handle personally. Regrettably, Yuryuki Shion wasn't exactly inclined towards managing division affairs. Prior Shaolin Fon's arrival, the 2nd Division's tasks were basically dealt with by Kisoku Urahara on Yuryuki's behalf. It was only after Shaolin Fon entered Yuryuki's service that Kisoku Urahara finally managed to free himself of squad obligations. Being helpful to Yuryuki-sama made Shaolin Fon extremely delighted. But whenever she thought about how her assistance allowed that timid, cowardly man more chances to keep Yuryuki-sama company, an inexplicable sense of gloom would well up instead. She couldn't bear to remain angry at Yuryuki-sama and could only vent her frustrations on that man. Just you wait. Once I finish handling all the squad affairs, I'll immediately go investigate that man and definitely won't let Yuryuki-sama stay together with a guy like him. I have to quickly expose that man's true colors to Yuryuki-sama. Otherwise, he'll surely lead Yuryuki-sama astray. Upon thinking this, Shaolin Fon's actions grew even more rapid. However, contrary to Shaolin Fon's expectations, why hadn't this Shinigami who delivered the documents left yet after so long? Could he be trying to waste her time spent on squad business instead? The notion of her interactions with Yuryuki-sama today being shortened because of administrative duties instantly soured Shaolin Fon's mood. Raising her head, Shaolin Fon spoke coldly, "Hey, what I just said earlier. Hey." Before she even finished verbalizing her words, Shaolin Fon realized she had mistaken this man's identity. The person before her clearly wasn't the regular one responsible for sending documents. Furthermore, though this man wore 2nd Division attire, Shaolin Fon's mind held no impression of him at all. While feeling rather awkward inside, Shaolin Fon swiftly adjusted her emotions and sat up properly before inquiring, "May I ask who you are?" "Greetings, I'm Ailin of Penal Force Designation number 120,358. I wish to issue a challenge against Vice Captain Marino Shinmada. May I know the procedures for logging my contention please?" Indeed, Ailin had come to register his duel. After all, any contention towards seated officers, vice captains, or the captain required a certain number of division members present as witnesses for the bout's results to be considered valid. Generally speaking, after agreeing with both parties on a date, the squad captain would send out a division-wide notice regarding a seated officer challenge match. Interested members could then come spectate and serve as witnesses. If the amount of observers on the day itself didn't meet requirements, the captain would also conscript some additional personnel to watch the fight. However, under normal circumstances, no seated officers challenge battle ever lacked a viewership. This was also a rare form of entertainment for everyone while allowing division members to understand their squad's powerhouses, aiding them in making certain choices during future missions. "What? You're that recently famous Ailin?" Upon hearing Ailin introduce himself, astonishment flashed across Shaolin Fon's eyes as she sized him up once more. One must understand that as the Stealth Corps, the 2nd Division's most outstanding traits were infiltration, assassination, and execution. Yet within such a squad emphasizing assassination, an anomaly like Ailin had appeared instead. From the perspective of 2nd Division members, Ailin could certainly be considered an oddball. Because the notoriety Ailin possessed wasn't derived from his abilities at all. Rather, it stemmed from his exceptional mastery in healing techniques. During the incident 1 year ago when the Katsuragi clan was ambushed, around 50 Penal Corps members were dispatched as reinforcements. In that battle, 7 died while over 40 more suffered varying degrees of injuries. At the time, relying solely on his powerful healing spells, Ailin had single-handedly pulled over a dozen gravely wounded people back from the brink of death. Later on, when sending these casualties to the 4th Division, Captain Retsu Anohana of said division even commented that the healing capabilities of whoever saved these men wasn't the slightest bit inferior to her own Vice-Captain Sanashuk Yamada. Chapter 9, Good Intentions. Captain Anohana had even said that without Ailin's healing techniques, at minimum over a dozen more lives from the 2nd Division would have perished during that one mission. At the time, Captain Anohana also smilingly told Yuryuki Shion, who came to visit her subordinate, that if Ailin wished to join the 4th Division, she could make arrangements for him to become 3rd seat. Given enough time, surpassing Sanashuk Yamada to become vice-captain wasn't impossible either. However, it seemed because that guy kept too low a profile for some time while Yuryuki-sama was also careless and unmindful, she forgot to look for him after returning. That was why Shaolin Fon found it unbelievable that in such a short period, rather than taking up Captain Unohana's offer to be third seat of 4th Division, this man now wanted to challenge 2nd Division's Marino Shinmada for the vice-captaincy instead. Though, could this guy actually defeat Marino Shinmada? Shaolin Fon felt somewhat uncertain on this matter. Marino Shinmada wasn't some average Shinigami. Not only had he once served under Yoriuki-sama's father, the previous Shine clan head Chika Shine, as 2nd Division vice-captain for over 100 years already, he was also that lazy man's childhood friend. Damn it, it should be that man always annoyingly tailing Yoriuki-sama instead. However, regardless of Shaolin Fon's immense distaste towards that indolent man, she had no choice but to acknowledge the talent he possessed. Even for a genius, at minimum 10 years were required just to complete Bankai training for their Zanpakuto. Yet that man. Shaking her head at this point to banish that annoying person from her mind, Shaolin Fon spoke up, "Alan, are you certain about challenging Vice-Captain Mada? Perhaps you aren't aware, but Marino Shinmada has been the 2nd Division's vice-captain for nearly 200 years already." Alan was a talent, most prominently displayed in his mastery over healing techniques. In all her years, Shaolin Fon had yet to hear of Captain Unohana personally headhunting anyone into 4th Division while even promising a third-seat position right off the bat. Alan was the first. Shaolin Fon had no intentions of losing such a talent from 2nd Division even if he couldn't remain eventually. She also didn't wish for Alan to leave with a bad impression of them. Having ascended to 2nd Division captaincy shortly after Yoriuki's departure, Shaolin Fon's talents and perspective weren't inferior either. "Oh? I see, thanks for the reminder." Shaolin Fon's concern was admittedly beyond Alan's expectations. However, he accepted her kind intentions all the same. Currently, Alan smiled and nodded at Shaolin Fon, "But since I've already decided to challenge Marinashin-sama, naturally I have some confidence about my odds too." As he spoke till here, Alan deliberately patted the Zanpakuto by his waist. "Very well, since you're brimming with assurance, I'll relay this matter to Yoriuki-sama and have her arrange your duel." Seeing Alan's response left Shaolin Fon frowning slightly as she opted not to persuade him any further. So he has already achieved Shikaihi? No wonder he's overflowing with confidence. Although, forget it. Perhaps his Zanpakuto abilities are simply formidable. I've recorded your Raitsu's signature. Once Yoriuki-sama finalizes the date, I'll notify you via Hell Butterfly. Thank you, little B. Having obtained the outcome he desired, Alan beamed at Shaolin Fon and gave his thanks before taking his leave from the captain's quarters. However, his parting words left Shaolin Fon momentarily stunned. Little B? How does he know of this name? As the next clan leader of the Fon clan, Shaolin Fon naturally had a name tied to her family. But she could only officially adopt that title after formally becoming her clan's head. Currently, only Yoriuki-sama was privy to that appellation which she frequently used to address Shaolin Fon. Alan was merely an ordinary Shinigami. How would he know of something so confidential? After musing briefly yet still unable to deduce the source of her other identity getting leaked, Shaolin Fon could only shake her head and resume handling administrative affairs. Simultaneously, she also didn't neglect to swiftly pass Alan's intentions of challenging Vice-Captain Mada via Hell Butterfly to Yoriuki-sama. Shaolin Fon swore that she definitely didn't deliberately notify Yoriuki-sama for the purpose of interrupting any private time between her and that man. Rather, being a 2nd Division member, she naturally had the duty to promptly report any matters she couldn't handle herself to Yoriuki-sama for her personal resolution instead. As the stealth unit, secrecy was paramount for 2nd Division. Hence, their oversight was far stricter compared to other divisions. Not only were members required to be on standby at all times, things like inter-squad gatherings for drinks which other divisions could enjoy simply didn't exist for them, especially the Penal Corps. Aside from missions, they genuinely had zero recreational activities external to their barrack quarters. Thus, a seated officers' challenge match was an exceptionally rare form of entertainment that everyone coveted. Indeed, once word of Alan intending to face off against Vice-Captain Marino Shinmada began circulating, his living quarters became practically non-stop. In particular, his former squad leader Kyuta Aokiji paid no less than 3 visits daily. Just earlier, Alan had only just seen off one squad mate he previously healed. Yet Kyuta Aokiji had already arrived again. "Ha ha ha, Alan, I knew you were destined for great things." Ignoring Alan's speechless stare, Kyuta Aokiji bumped him aside and barged right into the room with several companions. Quickly, Ailen, let me introduce you guys. This is 2nd Squad Captain Fukuyama Shirogane of the Patrol Corps. These two are Big Tachibana and Small Yanagi Shihei from his squad. Greetings Captain Fukuyama. Nice to meet you Big Tachibana, Small Yanagi. Once introductions were complete, Kyuta Aokiji wrapped an arm over Fukuyama Shirogane's shoulder and complained softly, Shirogane, I finally managed to excavate such a talent with huge potential. When Ailen heads over to your side in the future, you'll need to foster him well. Catching these words instantly grabbed Ailen's attention. So Kyuta was already paving the road ahead for him. Hey. Considering the people he brought over recently, there were members from nearly all 5 corps, detention, patrol, executive, recon, internal. Now, Fukuyama Shirogane was part of internal affairs. The 5 divisions in 2nd Division were detention, patrol, executive, recon, internal. Aside from detention which Ailen was from, Kyuta had pulled strings everywhere already. If Ailen succeeded in defeating Vice Captain Marino Shinmada, he would become one of 2nd Division's most prominent figures. But failure meant eliminating a mere penal corps member without leaving any traces was truly too easy. Clearly, fearful that Ailen would be resented after losing the match, Kyuta had cashed in a pile of connections early in hopes that Ailen could obtain a good position later regardless of the outcome. Chapter 10, Kisuke Urahara's new invention. Within 2nd Division, only the penal corps could be considered a high-risk post. The detention unit were guards tasked with overseeing the maggot's nest. Under normal circumstances, there was no need for them to get their hands dirty. Even if force was required, their opponents were incarcerated prisoners without Zanpakuto. The patrol corps served as scouts monitoring the other 12 divisions' movements. The existence of these sentries was also something those divisions were fully cognizant of. Hence, none would take initiative to provoke them without reason. The reconnaissance corps handled the gathering, processing, and archiving of intelligence from Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the human world into the Great Spirit Book archives. The Internal Affairs Unit was responsible for conveying messages and disseminating orders from Central 46 or the Captain Commander towards specified personnel. By transferring out of the Penal Corps to any of the other 4 units, Ailen's safety would be assured since he was still in 2nd Division. After realizing Kyuta Aokiji's kind intentions, Ailen's figure stiffened slightly. Captain Kyuta. Ailen still remembered back when he first graduated from the Shin Academy, his talents could at best be considered ordinary. He was still quite a distance away from qualifying for the Godi I-13 then. It was 2nd Division's visiting team led by Kyuta who noticed Ailen's satisfactory Shunpo standards and took the special initiative to recruit him into their folds. The subsequent 30 years spent under Kyuta's tutelage transformed Ailen from a greenhorn rookie barely surviving each mission into his present self. Although now vastly more powerful than Kyuta, the latter was still using his own methods to resolve the perils facing Ailen. Seeing this subtle kindness left the edges of Ailen's lips curling up slightly while his eyes grew warmer. Even in such a shitty world, there were still people who treated him well. Oh? How interesting! Within a desolate sandy land, a black hell butterfly rested on Yuryuki Shine's forefinger. After reading its delivered content, the edges of Yuryuki's lips quirked up amusedly. Hey, Kisuke. How much longer will you need? Very soon, 3 more days at most. Fine. Let me reply to Little B first. We'll head back after 3 days. 3 days later, a disheveled Kisuke Urahara stood before Yuryuki and tossed over a wooden training post. It's finally completed. Manufacturing this really wasn't easy. Stepping forward, Yuryuki rapped her knuckles against the human-shaped wooden post skeptically and asked in puzzlement, Kisuke, just this thing here can really allow someone to achieve Bankai within 3 days. Kisuke Urahara and Yuryuki Shine were childhood friends who grew up together. In Yuryuki's perspective, if Kisuke Urahara willed it, there was nothing he couldn't accomplish. However, the item he produced this time truly exceeded her comprehension. The most brilliant mind in Soul Society to Yuryuki would undoubtedly be Kisuke Urahara. Yet even for Kisuke Urahara himself, completing his own Bankai training had required close to 10 full years. This had already shattered precedents in Soul Society's records. But now, this latest device fabricated by Kisuke Urahara astonishingly enabled one to finish Bankai cultivation within a mere 3 days. Once this information disseminated, it would surely trigger massive upheaval across Soul Society. The The most crucial step for Bankai training is manifesting one's Zanpakuto spirit into physical form before subjugating it into submission to complete the process. However, throughout Soul Society's 2,000-year history, those naturally gifted enough to accomplish this have always been exceptionally rare. For most Shinigami, their Ryoryoku isn't sufficient enough to materialize their own Zanpakuto spirits. Chapter 11, Marino Shin Midas Advance. I call this invention of mine the Tenshintai, turn soul body, said Kisuke Urahara as he rapped his knuckles against the human-shaped target on the ground, unable to hold back an upward quirk of his lips. Being able to create something like this was certainly enough to make Kisuke Urahara feel proud. This thing can take the place of a Shinigami and manifest their Zanpakuto spirits physically, explained Urahara. After listening to Urahara's words, Yuriyuki stroked her chin and nodded in agreement. Indeed. In actuality, many vice-captains possess considerable strength, but their Ryutsu isn't sufficient enough to manifest their own Zanpakuto spirits, thus they've never been able to attain Bankai. If this Tenshintai can replace Shinigami by completing the manifestation of their Zanpakuto spirits, the number of people in Soul Society capable of undergoing Bankai training should increase by at least half, analyzed Yuriyuki. No, not that many, Urahara shook his head. Although most Shinigami are stuck at manifesting their Zanpakuto spirits, subjugating those manifested Zanpakuto isn't any easier than materializing them. Even if those people successfully materialize their Zanpakuto spirits using the Tenshintai, at most 2 or 3 out of 10 would manage to subjugate their spirits to attain Bankai. That would already be considered impressive. Also. At this point, Urahara ran his fingers through his hair and grinned foolishly. For my Tenshintai here, since it didn't utilize the Shinigami's own Ryutsu to manifest their Zanpakuto spirits, it'd be best if they can successfully subjugate the materialized spirit within 3 days. After 3 days, the manifested Zanpakuto spirit will go berserk from the Ryutsu incompatibility. By then. Hearing Urahara's last words made Yuriyuki cross her arms with a frown. The Zanpakuto going berserk? Kisuke, could your invention still be flawed? For Shinigami, a berserk manifested Zanpakuto spirit was nothing short of a full-blown disaster. The strength of most Shinigami relied upon their Zanpakuto by at least 80%, if not more. Shinigami could invoke their Zanpakuto spirits by calling out their names for Shikai, the first release, which would boost their Ryutsu by 3 to 5-fold while granting access to various abilities. Those captains who had attained Bankai were fine since their synchronization with their Zanpakuto spirits had reached tremendously high levels, allowing them to initiate Shikai without needing to vocalize their swords' names. However, for those still lacking Bankai, if their manifested Zanpakuto spirits went berserk and refused to acknowledge them, they wouldn't even be capable of releasing Shikai. In other words, those who trained Bankai using the Tenshintai would permanently lose access to even basic Shikai if they couldn't subjugate their spirits within 3 days. Yuriyuki was puzzled why Kisuke Urahara with his capabilities would create something so flawed. A Tenshintai without any side effects would have 100% efficacy. Yet this version contained such crippling drawbacks that its usefulness didn't even register at 1. Not everyone possessed the courage to gamble everything on a final leap of growth either. Moreover, even for those daring few souls brimming with gutsiness, it wasn't guaranteed they would have the requisite strength to overwhelm their Zanpakuto spirits in a mere 3 days either. As such, this resulted in a paradox. Those powerful enough to subjugate their manifested Zanpakuto spirits within 3 days wouldn't need the Tenshintai at all since they could manifest their spirits unaided while slowly enhancing themselves to eventually attain Bankai. On the other hand, those lacking the capacity to overwhelm their swords in 3 days would only cripple themselves by utilizing the Tenshintai, even losing access to basic Shikai. In other words, the sole beneficiaries of this risky invention were prodigies overflowing with potential yet unwilling to waste further time on the arduous path towards Bankai. Oh my, you saw right through me, Yuriyuki. After making a silly face at Yuriyuki, Urahara's expression grew serious as he nodded. I did it intentionally. As a researcher at heart, Kisuke Urahara was innately driven to pursue the unknown. Yet paradoxically, the more Urahara understood, the more lost he felt instead. At present, he was going through one of his most bewildered phases ever. Influenced by such a mindset, the items Kisuke Urahara recently invented like the Tenshintai were very useful in theory but rather useless in practical application. As Urahara's childhood friend, Yuriyuki Shion naturally comprehended his current state of affairs without needing any elaboration. Thus, she simply remained by his side silently without voicing her thoughts aloud. Let's get going, Yuriyuki. If my memory hasn't faded, that vice-captain's challenge match should be happening today, right? let's head over to see whether this brat truly possesses fighting capabilities matching his overflowing guts. Within 2nd Division's training grounds, over 100 souls had gathered at present. After 3 days of publicity, everyone was cognizant that Alan, the recently rising star of 2nd Division, had issued a contention for the vice-captain seat against the incumbent Marino Shinmada today. Seated officer challenges occurred once every few years. Yet for the vice-captain position, no attempts had taken place over the past 2 centuries. This wasn't merely indicative of the absolute trust the Shine placed towards the Mada. At the same time, it also displayed Marino Shinmada's own formidable might capable of suppressing most Shinigami aside from Yuryuki Shine and Kisokura Hara within 2nd Division. Standing at the training grounds center, Alan's eyes were shut as he focused his mind. If 2nd Division's vice-captain was Kisokura Hara instead, Alan wouldn't have even entertained the notion of challenging him. After all, likely no one understood that man's true depths better than himself in this entire world. However, against someone like Marino Shinmada, Alan didn't believe his odds of victory were slim. Oi, so you're the little pipsqueak who wants to challenge me? Just as Alan was nourishing his psyche, a sonorous voice sounded out from behind all of a sudden. Opening his eyes, Alan discovered his entire form enveloped within a gigantic shadow. Glancing up slightly, Alan spotted the male figure standing a few body lengths taller than himself. Brown flat-top haircut, close to 3 meters in height, paired with an even more massive and obese body compared to regular people that exuded a potent sense of pressure. 2nd Division's incumbent vice-captain, Marino Shinmada. Ah, yes I am. Please offer me your guidance later, Vice-Captain Mada. Alan cupped his fists respectfully. Ha 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 ha, what a bold and gutsy little fella you are. Contrary to Alan's expectations, instead of berating him for his arrogance at challenging the vice-captain's seat, Marino Shinmada laughed loudly and patted Alan's shoulder amiably instead. As your seniors, nothing delights us more than witnessing our juniors surpassing us eventually. Kid, I like your moxie. No matter the outcome after our match, drinks are on me. After speaking, Marino Shinmada guffawed and strode past Alan towards the opposing side of the grounds. However, after brushing past Alan, Marino Shinmada's previously mirthful expression swiftly morphed into utmost gravity instead. This little brat isn't so simple. Chapter 12, The Challenge Begins. Marino Shinmada was the family head of the Mada, a lower noble clan. At the inception of Soul Society, the Mada were merely an average family. However, tremendous changes occurred for the Mada after Marino Shinmada's birth. Firstly, Marino Shin naturally possessed outstanding aptitude, graduating top of his class from the Spiritual Arts Academy. Secondly, upon joining the 2nd Division, Marino Shinmada immediately leveraged the full might of his clan in pledging loyalty towards the Shion. The Mada offered their centuries of established business channels in providing immense aid for the Shion, becoming retainers as the Shion clan leader Chika Shion elevated the Mada into lower nobility. Thirdly, Marino Shinmada's personal strength grew swiftly. In less than a century, he had already become an indispensable right-hand man for Chika Shion as 2nd Division's vice-captain. After Chika's resignation, Marino Shinmada continued serving Yuryuki Shion loyally. Even when his childhood friend Kisokura Hara surpassed Marino Shinmada in strength, Yuryuki Shion didn't replace him from the vice-captain seat. Of course, Kisokura Hara's own reluctance to accept the position also factored into this arrangement. However, occupying the vice-captain office for nearly 200 years didn't cause Marino Shinmada to become arrogant whatsoever. On the contrary, this period made him utterly cognizant of his limits. Until now, Marino Shinmada didn't have the faintest clues on manifesting his Zanpakuto spirit. Furthermore, his Rasetsu ceased growing a century ago. Hopes for attaining Bankai were zilch. Estimated another few decades and retirement would be forthcoming. Before then, Marino Shinmada still hoped to pave the path ahead for his son. This brat called Alan wasn't very old, supposedly not even 40 yet, but his notoriety was already substantial enough to be considered a worthy investment target. After discovering Alan's intentions to challenge him, Marino Shinmada's esteem rose even higher instead. Other than an utter fool, anyone daring enough to contend for the vice-captain seat must have at minimum already attained their Zanpakuto's initial release, Shikai. Moreover, their manifested sword's capabilities would need to be exceptionally powerful too. If one's Zanpakuto was weak after releasing, even winning a seated officer position would be difficult. Initially, Marino Shinmada harbored thoughts of going easy on Alan to grant the latter a dignified defeat. But after meeting Alan face to face, Mada realized even preserving his own prestige would be hard if he didn't utilize everything at his disposal. After centuries as a Shinigami, while Marino Shin personal growth stagnated, his discernment remained sharp as ever. From Aelin, he vaguely sensed traces reminiscent of the bearings exhibited by Lord Chika, Lady Yoryuaki, and even that damnable third seat Kisokura Hara. Those three individuals. Good heavens! Could this Aelin brat be of similar ilk? Entertaining such notions nearly caused Marinashin's footsteps to falter. Nonetheless, as someone long accustomed to the grand stage, he swiftly stabilized his state of mind. Halting 10 meters away from Aelin, Marino Shin turned around with both arms crossed and silently awaited Captain Yoryuaki Shine's arrival alongside Aelin. Sensing Vice Captain Mada's appearance, the other spectators promptly quieted down while keeping their eyes glued towards both parties. They didn't need to wait long. Shortly after a breeze blew past, Yoryuaki and Kisokura Hara manifested amidst Aelin and Marino Shin before vanishing again, their forms flickering as they relocated themselves outside the premises, opening up space for the upcoming confrontation. Lady Yoryuaki! Lady Yoryuaki! Including Aelin, everyone present bowed respectfully at Yoryuaki Shine. Ha ha ha, it appears we didn't arrive late, commented Yoryuaki amusedly after laughing loudly with hands akimbo. Her expression quickly turned grave as she glanced over Aelin and Marino Shin. Aelin, I ask again for confirmation from both parties. Do you still wish to proceed with the challenge? Lady Yoryuaki, I choose to contend. Very well. Good luck to you then. I hereby declare this duel for 2nd Division's Vice Captain seat between squad member Aelin and current Vice Captain Marino Shin Mada officially underway. Whoosh! After finishing her proclamation, Yoryuaki and Urahara's figures flickered once more as they withdrew beyond the training grounds perimeter, opening up space for Aelin and Marinashin's confrontation. Vice Captain Mada, please guide me. As the challenger, Aelin took the initiative by unsheathing his Zanpakuto first. Oh! At the sight of Aelin's manifested blade, Marinashin's countenance grew even more grave without the slightest shred of negligence. His sword left its scabbard as well in a flash. All Zanpakuto generally resembled each other in sealed state regardless of whatever fantastical powers they later gained upon release. Yet astonishingly, the blade in Aelin's hand instead exuded an air of archaism and damage. Its tattered form and serrated edges. If not for the seriousness of this battle, everyone present would likely have mocked Aelin's sorry excuse for a Zanpakuto. But in such a confrontational context, none of the watching 2nd Division members dared belittle Aelin. His blade's dilapidated appearance hinted at some sort of special ability instead. Come! Raya! Marino Shin Mada bellowed fiercely as towering Ryotsuo erupted from his body, shrouding him in flickers of white light. Hey! How strange! Vice Captain Mada is actually taking this so cautiously right from the start. He's utilizing full power from the get-go already. Witnessing Marino Shin Mada's state astonished all observers. Having one's Ryotsuo leak externally represented only the lack of released Zanpakuto. Clearly, Marino Shin was prepared to stake everything on this battle. Boom! Matching Marino Shin Mada, Aelin unleashed his Ryotsuo as well. This! Unbelievable! Aelin's Ryotsuo was actually evenly matched with Vice Captain Mada's. Aelin's eruption similarly surpassed everyone's predictions. After Aelin's rising reputation, all were aware that he had only been in 2nd Division for 30 years. Attaining the 6th seat officer's level of Ryotsuo within a mere half-century, Aelin's talents were genuinely freakish. Whoosh! In the spectators' eyes, Aelin and Marinashin's silhouettes vanished in the next instant. Boom! Clang! Clang clang! Clang! Rumbling rang out as sparks scattered while clear sounds of weapons clashing finally entered their ears. Such speed! Someone involuntarily cried out. While perhaps lagging behind other areas, any Shinigami's Shunpo capability from 2nd Division was guaranteed to meet stringent benchmarks. Yet astoundingly, many couldn't even glimpse Aelin and Marino Shin after images in this intense melee. Clearly, both Aelin and Vice Captain Marino Shin Mada's Shunpo far exceeded everyone present. These observers could only depend on the erupting sparks and intersecting weapons to ascertain Aelin and Marinashin's positioning. However, whenever their sight landed towards the scattering embers' origins, the dueling pair had invariably shifted elsewhere instead. Chapter 13, Shikai, Tesuga. Outside the training grounds, both Yoryuaki Shine and Kisokura Hara were somewhat astonished. While cognizant that Aelin's confidence towards challenging Vice Captain Mada must stem from faith in his Zanpakuto's capabilities, they didn't expect him to be evenly matched against Marino Shin Mada in Shunpo and swordsmanship before either party had even released their swords. No, not evenly matched. Exchanging a mutual glance, what Yoriyuki and Kisokura saw in each other's eyes was incredulity. With their strength, naturally they could discern that beneath the facade of parity, Ailen instead surpassed Marinoshin slightly in both swordsmanship and shunpo. Damn monster! Clang! After a horizontal slash to parry Ailen's blow, Marinoshin instantly flickered away with shunpo. Yet in the next moment, Ailen's form materialized ahead to obstruct his path once more, forcing Mada to unsheath his blade defensively again. Despite Marinoshin's bulky physique, he wouldn't have remained 2nd Division's vice-captain for close to 2 centuries without exceptional shunpo capabilities. But now in his confrontation against Ailen, Marinoshin Mada felt completely suppressed everywhere. Regardless of shunpo or swordsmanship, he could only meet Ailen's assaults passively. Such sentiments brought Marinoshin back over a century ago when he had crossed blades against Captain Chika Shion. He was equally powerless back then too. Could this Ailen truly wield might rivaling Lord Chika? Bang! In just the span of a few minutes, Marinoshin's back was already drenched in cold sweat. Comparatively, Ailen was far more at ease. After wholly internalizing Shinetsu Kisaragi's experiences, all facets of Ailen's Shinigami arts had obtained tremendous boosts. Especially for swordsmanship. One must understand, Shinetsu Kisaragi was a disciple of Captain Commander Yamamoto. Naturally, his sword skills cultivated under Yamamoto wouldn't be lacking. Presently, Ailen's swordsmanship could be considered above average even amongst the Godai 13 captains. The disparity between captain class and those below was akin to a chasm. Admittedly, Ailen's current Ryutsu was merely at the 6th seats level, still over 10 times removed from the captains. Via attacking a higher dimensional construct, Marinoshin was utterly helpless against Ailen despite equivalent Ryutsu on paper. However, if Ailen went overboard, he would undoubtedly be grinding Marinoshin's face against the dirt. By then, perhaps every single member of 2nd Division, including Captain Shion herself, would be incredibly displeased. After all, Marinoshin was 2nd Division's vice-captain for nearly 200 years now. To a certain degree, he represented their prestige. Meanwhile, as a newly rising figure, Ailen hadn't earned widespread recognition from his comrades yet. Acting too arrogantly might trigger resentment against him instead. Hence, despite Ailen clearly suppressing Marinoshin presently, outward appearances made it seem like an evenly contested bout between geniuses of the same era, a fated battle where heroes finally met their matches. Clang! Ailen and Marinoshin's forms re-emerged at the training grounds center, their shapes forming a vivid contrast of small versus large. Creak creak! As the battered blade ground against the pristine sword, spiritual power surged from both weapons seconds later, blasting the pair backwards. Huff huff! 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 Marinoshin's panted heavily as his eyes remained fixed warily on Ailen. Just how long has it been since he fought so intensely? Upon this thought, Marinoshin Mada's eyes flashed icily as towering Ryutsu erupted to envelope both his body and Zanpakuto in resonance. Smash him apart, Zangetsu! Accompanying Marinoshin's bellow, the blade in his hands suddenly expanded into a massive spiked mace over 3 meters long. Boom! With Shikai unleashed, Marinoshin's Ryutsu intensified fivefold. For Shinigami, especially those who have released their Zanpakuto, at minimum 80% of their power stemmed from their swords. A Zanpakuto's initial release boosts its Shinigami master's Ryutsu by 3 to 5 times. Bankai provides a 5 to 10-fold enhancement. Despite being unable to touch Bankai's threshold across over 2 centuries, Marinoshin had developed his Shikai's strength to its utmost limits. The amplification to his Ryutsu peaked at the upper echelons for initial release, 5 times stronger. This represented Marinoshin maximum battle state. While ordinary condition Marinoshin Mada was no match for Ailen, by manifesting his Zanpakuto Zangetsu, he was confident only a scant few vice-captains could exceed his power now. Ailen had just been in 2nd Division for 30 years. Judging from equivalent Ryutsu, his Bankai training definitely wasn't complete yet. Although surpassing himself in shunpo and swordsmanship, Marinoshin refused to believe Ailen could still maintain the advantage with his Shikai unleashed. Indeed, despite harboring assurance towards himself earlier, Marinoshin knew his chances of victory were zilch even now after sensing the monumental pressure exuded from Ailen. Releasing your Zanpakuto now. Sensing Marinoshin transformation made Ailen's expression grow solemn too. Recently, Ailen had also learned some basic information regarding Marinoshin from Captain Kyuta Aokiji. Supposedly, his Zanpakuto Zangetsu was a pure power-type blade. In the past, Vice Captain Mada had allegedly obliterated Aminos Grande with one blow before. Aminos Grande hey! That was a 900-meter tall terrifying existence. Only 5th seat officers who have released their Zanpakuto or stronger Shinigami could confront Minos. Most average-seated officers would need collaborative teamwork from at least 3 to 4 others to swiftly eliminate Aminos. For Marinoshin to instantly vaporize Aminos Grande, his Zanpakuto's offensive potential was certainly formidable. Facing the five-fold strengthened Marinoshin, Aelin didn't dare underestimate him either. Instantly, Aelin channeled his Ryoryoku into the battered sword in his hand and shouted loudly. Tessagah! Boom! Accompanying Aelin's roar, the dilapidated blade in his hands finally revealed its true form. The slender and ragged length expanded into a wide cleaver-like fang sword as overwhelming Ryotsu suffused the immediate area with dazzling radiance. Naturally, releasing his Zanpakuto boosted Aelin's Ryotsu as well. However, Tessagah was only semi-finished currently. The increase to Aelin's energies was merely threefold. At present in terms of sheer Ryotsu intensity, Marinoshin occupied the superior position. Chapter 14, Wind Scar. After successfully materializing Tessagah and obtaining the resulting Ryotsu feedback, Aelin's energies weren't too far apart from Marinoshin Mada's. However, once both parties released their Zanpakuto, Aelin's Ryotsu was clearly inferior by at least half compared to Marinoshin. After all, Marinoshin had already refined his initial release to its utmost limits, amplifying his Ryotsu by a staggering 5 times over. Meanwhile, as just a semi-finished product, Tessagah's transformation into a fang blade had only tripled Aelin's Ryotsu. There's a chance. Sensing Aelin's weaker Ryotsu, elation surged within Marinoshin Mada. A Shinigami's battle ultimately boiled down to one's Ryotsu. Although Marinoshin's current Ryotsu wasn't sufficient enough to nullify or ignore Zanpakuto's abilities completely, under the boosts of augmented Ryotsu, his speed, strength, and defenses had all obtained tremendous enhancements. He refused to believe that he would still lose despite clearly exceeding Aelin substantially in Ryotsu. Raya! Bolstered by this notion, Marinoshin brandished his massive spiked mace and charged towards Aelin. Facing the incoming opponent, Aelin gripped Tessagah's hilt with both hands and hefted it overhead, slashing down at Marinoshin. Boom! To a certain degree, the magnified Tessagah could be considered a power and cleave type Zanpakuto. However, Tessagah was far inferior regarding brute force amplification compared to Marinoshin's Zangetsu manifested as a giant mace. When Tessagah and Zangetsu intersected, the resultant strength forced Aelin's frame lower by a section. Boom! The ground beneath Aelin's feet detonated outwards with a 5-meter radius, the fracturing earth even extending 10 meters out. What monstrous might! Standing inside the crater, Aelin's eyes were wide as Tessagah trembled in his hands from blocking Zangetsu. Ha! Azure Ryotsu erupted from Aelin's body, the abrupt spike instantly enhancing both his speed and power. Ryotsu eruption. This was a common Ryotsu manipulation technique many Shinigami were privy to. Strictly speaking, it was a do-or-die skill for those with weaker Ryotsu. Its principles revolved around concentrating one's Ryotsu before triggering an explosive discharge, trading short-term power amplifications for rapid depletion. What could sustain an hour of combat would likely be exhausted in less than 5 minutes instead. Clang! After utilizing Ryotsu eruption, Aelin and Marinoshin's battle intensified to new heights. More and more enormous craters emerged around the training grounds from their intense skirmish. Through the Ryotsu boost to close their disparity, combined with swordsmanship exceeding Marinoshin's by a substantial margin, Aelin managed to contend evenly against Marinoshin's giant mace using his mere 1-meter-long Tessagah. He even gradually gained the upper hand. However, despite being at a disadvantage presently, Marinoshin's psyche remained remarkably composed. Under current circumstances, Marinoshin only needed to endure until Aelin's Ryotsu eruption ran its course for victory to be guaranteed for himself. Clang 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 clang! Aelin's silhouette flickered about as afterimages surrounded Marinoshin completely. Blade beams resembling a dense net enshrouded him within. However, the effects from Aelin's barrage weren't ideal. Despite Marinoshin's bulky frame, his motions were actually extremely agile. His Shunpo rankings in 2nd Division could also be considered top 3. Well, with Aelin's presence now, Marinoshin's spot probably had to be moved back by 1 rank. Since Aelin was running circles around him, although Aelin's Shunpo speed exceeded Marinoshin's, his attack rate still wasn't fast enough to overwhelm his reactions. Moreover, taking advantage of Zangetsu's substantial size as a giant mace, Marino Shin only needed to adjust his positioning slightly to hide most of himself behind the mace, utilizing it to shield against Ailen's offense. As such, Ailen's assault could only open several non-fatal lacerations across Marino Shin's body without achieving much. Whoosh! Seeing his attack's futility, Ailen stopped wasting Rasetsu and flickered instantly to stand 20 meters away facing Marino Shin. So powerful! That's right. Regardless of whether it's Vice Captain Mada or Ailen, both are incredibly strong. At this time, the 400-plus 2nd Division Shinigami spectators finally regained their wits after the earlier intense confrontation. As they watched Ailen and Marino Shin Mada, the gazes of these Shinigami seemed to glow vibrantly. To be a Shinigami was never a safe occupation. Every year, many would perish. This was also the foremost reason why the 13 court guard squads recruited annually from the Spiritual Arts Academy. Having a powerful comrade enhanced everyone's survival odds tremendously. Take for example the earlier most dangerous rescue mission where over a dozen heavily injured 2nd Division members had narrowly avoided deaths because of Ailen. Witnessing Ailen's formidable might now instantly set their minds at ease. After today's battle, regardless of whether Ailen succeeded his challenge, at minimum a seated officer position was surely reserved for him. Kisuke, what's your opinion? Watching the two men ahead, Yoryuki questioned Kisuke Urahara beside her. My opinion. Before Kisuke Urahara even responded, Shaolin Fon couldn't help interrupting when Lady Yoryuki didn't pose her query at herself first. She instantly took over the conversation. My lady, while that man called Ailen does have some skills, overall he's still lacking compared to Vice Captain Mada, right? Just observe, he's already so desperate by using Rasetsu eruption. Once his Ryoryoku depletes, naturally he wouldn't be Vice Captain Mada's match. Conversely, if Vice Captain Mada utilized Rasetsu eruption himself, that Ailen guy definitely couldn't withstand it. Oh my, oh my. My views happen to differ from yours though, Kisuke Urahara glanced at Shaolin Fon amusedly. Beneath his disheveled bangs, rare seriousness surfaced within those normally bewildered eyes of his. That man called Ailen will emerge victorious in this bout. Impossible, Shaolin Fon didn't believe a single word from Kisuke's nonsense. Judging from the earlier situation, although Ailen had obtained some advantages via Rasetsu eruption, those benefits couldn't constitute decisive factors determining victory. However, in the next instant, Shaolin Fon's pupils abruptly constricted. She witnessed swirling winds coiling around the large blade in that man's hands deemed unworthy of praise by herself. With a sweep from Ailen, those zephyrs transformed into 3 massive slash waves billowing towards Marino Shin Mada. Wind Scar. Chapter 15, Victory. It looks like without Tessaga's special move, I won't emerge victorious in this battle. After calming his breathing, sensing his remaining Ryoryoku, Ailen shook his head slightly. Although his Shunpo could currently touch a captain's threshold, lacking sufficient Rasetsu was still his fatal weakness. Without powerful enough Rasetsu, even if his Shinigami skills were stronger, he couldn't exert appropriate might. Between a third-seat officer and a captain-level lieutenant, their Rasetsu intensity differed by over 10 times. Having been 2nd Division's vice-captain for nearly 200 years, Marino Shin Mada's own strength was already honed to its peak. After releasing his Zanpakuto, Marino Shin Mada's Rasetsu, while perhaps not comparing to a captain's usual state, wasn't too far off either. If the captains didn't release their own blades, wishing to resolve Marino Shin Mada quickly in a short period wasn't an easy matter. Ailen had utilized Rasetsu eruption earlier as a technique. If he didn't defeat Marino Shin Mada while still having ample Ryoryoku, once his energies were exhausted, he would be like a fish on a chopping block, ready for slaughter. Vice Captain Mada, next I'll be using my Zanpakuto's special move. I haven't displayed this outside since initially completing its training. Furthermore, this move packs substantial might. Please be careful, Vice Captain Mada. What? Your Zanpakuto's special move? Hearing Ailen's words caused Marino Shin Mada's pupils to constrict. Every Shinigami would learn of their Zanpakuto's name after reaching a certain degree of resonance. Then by calling out their blades' names, Shinigami could achieve initial release. This was a Zanpakuto's Shikai. A Zanpakuto's special move was something only wielded by powerful swords. Especially since even someone of Ailen's level claimed it had tremendous power. This clearly wasn't any ordinary technique. Marino Shin Mada didn't dare be negligent whatsoever right now. Boom! Monumental Rasetsu erupted from Marino Shin Mada. He had utilized Rasetsu eruption as well. Between Rasetsu eruption and his Zanpakutos initial release amplifications, Marino Shinmada's Rasetsu had reached a lieutenant's second-class level. Come. Very well. Seeing Marino Shinmada prepared, Alan didn't hesitate anymore. Most of his Rasetsu poured from his body into Tessagá in his right hand. Strands of wind swirled around Tessagá's blade. Next, facing Marino Shinmada's direction, Alan suddenly swung his Zanpakut down. Wind scar. Whoosh. 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 3 substantial wind blades seemingly tore space itself asunder, bringing peerless momentum towards Marino Shinmada. HAAA. At the same time, Marino Shinmada's Rasetsu also entered his Zanpakut, activating his strongest technique. Drunkard, Rampage. Boom. Marino Shinmada unleashed his giant mace, smashing fiercely against the 3 oncoming wind blades. Creak creak. Rumble rumble. So heavy. Marino Shinmada gripped his wolf fang mace tightly. Drunkard's Rampage was his Zanpakutos' ultimate move. However, even his most powerful special move could only barely block Alan's attack. The subsequent stronger slashes still forced Marino Shinmada's bulky frame backwards. Both his feet gouged long furrows across the training grounds. No good. Can't block it. After persevering a few seconds, Marino Shinmada exhausted Drunkard Rampage's remnants. He couldn't obstruct Wind Scar anymore. At the last moment, Marino Shinmada only managed to shield his vitals with Gagetsu before getting swept up by Alan's technique completely. Ah! Marino Shinmada's wails had just sounded out when Alan glimpsed Yoryuki Shine and Kisokura materializing amidst the grounds in the next instant. In Kisokura hands was the bloodied Marino Shinmada. So fast! Alan was astonished internally. Although aware Yoryuki Shine and Kisokura were powerful, knowing and personally experiencing were different matters. However, Alan had witnessed a captain unveil Bankai before. Moreover, neither Yoryuki or Urahara had released Rasetsu. Hence the pressure they exuded didn't exceed Alan's sensations when facing Yamamoto Genri Yusai previously. Instead, beyond pressure from their strength, greater apprehension stemmed from Alan's own heart. Nonetheless, catching a glimpse of their capabilities relieved some of Alan's nerves. In that instant earlier, Yoryuki had directly severed Wind Scar's remnants while Urahara dashed in front of Marino Shinmada, pulling the latter from Wind Scar's trajectory. Both their actions seemed casual. Urahara hadn't released his Zanpakut either, same with Yoryuki not utilizing Shunk. Clearly, neither Alan or Marino Shinmada currently warranted seriousness from Yoryuki Shine and Kisokura. Lady Yoryuki, third seat Urahara. Alan reverted his materialized Tessagá back into its tattered form, sheathing it by his waist. He bent down to salute Yoryuki and Urahara. With these two's intervention, his challenge could be considered concluded. Cough cough. Tui. After being rescued by Kisokura, Marino Shinmada coughed out mouthfuls of blood. However, despite heavy injuries, Marino Shinmada didn't conduct himself without dignity. Instead, he gave Alan a thumbs up, laughing loudly. Ha ha ha. Not bad brat. I admit defeat this round. Although everyone realized this bout's outcome already when the pair unleashed their Zanpakutos special moves, personally hearing Marino Shinmada acknowledge his loss still felt like fantasy for the spectators. Wow! I'm not dreaming right. Vice Captain Mada actually lost. This battle gave 2nd Division's members a roller coaster of emotions. From Alan initially suppressing Marino Shinmada, to Marino Shinmada gaining advantages after releasing his Shikai, finally culminating in their ultimate moves confrontation. None could determine the victor until the very end. But regardless of whether it was Alan or Marino Shinmada, the capabilities exhibited by both during this fight let everyone accept either as 2nd Division's vice-captain without complaints. For Shinigami, background meant nothing without sufficient personal strength to convince their subordinates. Chapter 16, Promotion to Vice-Captain. Shun Kukaki, the 6th Division's vice-captain, was from one of the 4 great noble clans, the Kukaki family. As the successor to the family head and the son of Jinrei Kukaki, the 6th Division captain, his background was quite deep. But how many people in the 6th Division actually respected him? Shun Kukaki was talented, having achieved Shikai at a young age and vice-captain level strength. However, his poor physique was a major hindrance, causing him to only be able to exert 50 to 60% of his full power due to illness. Of course, when it came to sickness, Jaishur Yukatake, the captain of the 13th Division, was also plagued by poor health, often unable to exert his full strength. But Yukate's talents far exceeded Shunkukaki's by more than just a bit. Even when not at full power, Yukate still possessed strength surpassing normal captains. This was something Shunkukaki could never compare to. Now, through his battle with Marino Shinmada, Ailen had proven to the 2nd Division members that he possessed the strength to become their vice-captain. Especially Ailen's final blow, aside from Yoryuki Shion and Kisuke Urahara, no one present had the confidence to survive it. Just look, even after Yoryuki nullified the trailing slashes, 3 furrows over 10 meters deep and 50 meters long remained carved into the training grounds. My apologies, Vice-Captain Mada. Since it was my first time using that move, I didn't have good control over it. With Mada admitting defeat, Ailen naturally chose to be modest. He walked over and extended his hands, green kid light instantly enveloping Mada's body. Soon, under Ailen's healing kid, Mada's injuries rapidly recovered. After all, Drunkard Rampage had blocked much of Wind Scar's power. And when the remnants broke through, Yoryuki shattered them while Urahara swiftly pulled Mada to safety. So Mada's injuries were still within Ailen's capabilities to treat. In less than a minute, Mada's wounds were completely healed by Ailen. Ha ha ha. I once heard Captain Retsu Anohana say she wanted you as the 3rd seat of the 4th Division. At the time, I thought she overestimated you. But now, I feel she underestimated you, Ailen. After getting up from the ground and moving around, aside from tattered clothes and some lingering blood stains, Mada felt he had fully recovered. Not even Sanashuk Yamada can accomplish healing like this. Sanashuk Yamada was currently the 4th Division's vice-captain. His mastery of healing kid was second only to Captain Retsu Anohana. Vice-Captain Mada overpraises me. I'm far from comparing to Vice-Captain Yamada. Ailen shook his head at Mada's compliments, not taking them seriously at all. After all, Yamada would eventually help create Nemuri Hakugo. Ailen had yet to reach realms like creating life. Of course, that was over a century later. Currently, Yamada possibly hadn't attained such mastery yet. Hey Ailen, you defeated me fair and square. How can you belittle yourself like that? Hearing Ailen's words displeased Mada instead. What? Does the 2nd Division's vice-captain fall short of the 4th Division's in your eyes? Or is the entire 2nd Division inferior to them? Well. Ailen was taken aback, not expecting Mada to react so strongly. But after considering further, even combining 2nd Division's previous captain Senjimaru Shutara, current captain Yoryuki Shion, and next captain Sui Fng, their strength probably still fell short against Captain Anohana. Captain Anohana was one of the first Kenpeki, deemed a great villain alongside Genrisai Ishigakuni Yamamoto a millennium ago in Soul Society's early days. Yoryuki might stand a chance after developing Shun's Raijin and Rake forms. Without those, she and the other two were just vegetables before Anohana. But Ailen was in the 2nd Division now. Voicing such thoughts would be truly foolish. Of course not. We're the strongest covered ops force, the 2nd Division. A medical relief unit like the 4th Division isn't on the same level at all. That's right. Yoryuki and Urahara exchanged awkward looks. These two were really ignorant, hey. Afraid they might spout more shocking nonsense, Yoryuki hurriedly interrupted Mada. She brought Ailen before the spectating Shinigami, raising his hand high as she loudly announced. Everyone, the victor for this vice-captain challenge under the witness of over 400 division members and myself, 2nd Division Captain Yoryuki Shion, has been decided. I now proclaim with my authority as captain that the winner is Ailen. From now on, Ailen shall assume the post of 2nd Division's vice-captain. Former vice-captain Marino Shinmada is exempt from his subsequent challenges and shall share 3rd seat duties with Kisuke Urahara. Does anyone have objections? No. Vice-Captain Ailen. 3rd seat Mada. Vice-Captain Ailen. 3rd seat Mada. Under observation from over 400 members, Ailen had successfully defeated the former vice-captain to become 2nd Division's new second-in-command. With Mada's help afterwards, Ailen gradually grew familiar with some of the division's affairs. However, more often he focused on forging weapons within his inner world. After seeing Yoryuki and Urahara, 3 more Zanpakuto had appeared on his world's Sword Hill. 2 were at the same level as Hiranmaru while the 3rd resided in the lower half. These represented Beniheim, Yoryuki and Mada's Zanpakuto. Having forged them boosted Ailen's Ryatsu tremendously. Especially the 2 that had attained Bankai, tripling Ailen's Ryoryoku. Now, Ailen's Ryatsu exceeded newly promoted 6th seats by 4 times. In other words, any 6th seed whose Shikai didn't raise their Raitsuo at least fourfold would be weaker than Ailin's ordinary state. Chapter 17, New Zanpakut. The realm of captain-level existence, second-class Raitsu, was the most basic requirement. Only with second-class Raitsu could one complete the materialization of a Zanpakut. Then, there was a Zanpakutos final form release, Bankai. During the day, Ailin handled the vice-captain's affairs together with Marino Shinmada, occasionally also receiving missions. But before Ailin, whose strength had greatly increased, those missions were merely adding a few more merits to his service record. At night, Ailin would wield Yuryuki Shion and Kisokura Hara's Zanpakut, absorbing the two's cultivation experiences to further enhance his own basic strength. Yuryuki didn't often use her Zanpakut, so Ailin gained nearly no swordplay experience from it. However, what Yuryuki was most famous for was her Shunpo mastery. In all of Soul Society, Yuryuki was known as the goddess of flash. Regarding Shunpo, no one could match her. From Yuryuki's Zanpakut, Ailin obtained her Shunpo experience. From Kisokura Hara's Zanpakut, the biggest gain for Ailin was demon arts abilities. At the same time, based on Kisokura Hara's Princess Benahim's Blood Mist Shield ability, Ailin had successfully forged a sheath for Tessagah that could deploy a defensive barrier. Thus, Tessagah's completion had risen somewhat, with its Shikai boosting his Raitsuo by 3.5 times now. Time passed by as everyone made progress. Oh! One day, due to squad affairs, Ailin went to the captain's office to meet with Yuryuki Shion. Usually though, the one Ailin met was Yuryuki's little fang girl, Shaolin Fon. Over the past few years, although Ailin and Shaolin Fon hadn't conversed much, they were quite familiar with one another. This feeling is. The instant Ailin saw Shaolin Fon, his eyes narrowed slightly as his gaze looked towards the Zanpakut by Shaolin Fon's waist. The azure lines in his eyes flashed. In just a few seconds, Ailin had finished analyzing Shaolin Fon's Zanpakut. Congratulations, Miss Shaolin. Are you preparing for your seated officer challenge soon? After placing the documents on the desk, Ailin smiled and congratulated Shaolin Fon. For Ailin, Shaolin Fon completing her Zanpakutos gestation was great news. After all, in Ailin's mind was a weapon extremely compatible with two-hit certain kill. Once he returned and forged Suzumebachi tonight, that weapon ought to manifest too. Oh? You can actually tell that I've completed my Zanpakutos release. Shaolin Fon raised her head in surprise as she looked at Ailin. Although she still held some resentment towards Ailin for losing a bet during his vice-captain challenge match, after years of interaction, any grudges had long faded away. Moreover, from the documents she handled, Ailin was extremely proficient as 2nd Division's vice-captain, completing all missions perfectly. Additionally, unlike the noble heirs of ex-vice-captain Marino Shinmada, Ailin always took point during missions. Whenever squad members were injured, he would even use Healing Kit on them. Over the years, he had gained the absolute trust and prestige of the division's Shinigami, even surpassing the previous vice-captain Mada. This point alone made Shaolin Fon approve somewhat more of Ailin. What surprised Shaolin Fon even more was that she had only just completed her Zanpakutos gestation a few days ago. Yesterday, after gaining her Zanpakutos approval, she finished training her initial release. Even Lady Yuryuki hadn't noticed yet, but this vice-captain Ailin discovered it with a single glance. No, how could Lady Yuryuki possibly be unaware? Shaolin Fon's meager accomplishments were likely too trivial for Lady Yuryuki to even praise. But if she succeeded in her seated officer challenge, would she finally earn Lady Yuryuki's commendation? The seated officer challenge. At this thought, Shaolin Fon knocked her head lightly with the pen in her hand. This vice-captain Ailin was very powerful, especially his Zanpakutos special move Wind Scar. That technique could likely envelop a huge area ahead of Ailin. Shaolin Fon wasn't confident she could escape it. As for third seat Kisokura Hara, although Shaolin Fon looked down on the man, she knew his strength was barely below Lady Yuryuki. There was also the other third seat and former vice-captain, Marino Shinmada. After considering her Zanpakutos abilities and Marinashins for a bit, Shaolin Fon made her decision with determination. As Shaolin Fon was filling out her challenge form, Ailin craned his neck to easily spot the name she wrote down. Oh? Miss Shaolin Fon actually wants to challenge third seat Mada. Looks like Miss Shaolin Fon's Zanpakut is quite formidable. Third seat Mada sure is unlucky. Ailin shook his head with a laugh. Indeed, this Marino Shinmada truly had awful luck. Undeniably, Marino Shinmada was quite strong. However, against Shaolin Fon and her Zanpakut, he had zero compatibility. Before reaching a certain level of Ryutsu, Shaolin Fon's Zanpakut 2-hit certain kill was genuinely unsolvable. Admittedly, Marino Shinmada's Ryutsu exceeded Shaolin Fon's by a lot. But it still wasn't enough to ignore Suzumebachi's ability completely. With Shaolin Fon's Shunpo, avoiding Marino Shinmada's attacks and finding chances to strike him wasn't difficult at all. Huh? Don't talk as if I've already won. Shaolin Fon's brow twitched. After arranging her challenge documents properly, she shot Ailin a glare. Although unwilling to admit it verbally, pride was evident within her expression. After leaving the captain's office, Ailin returned to his own residence. Buzz. Azure radiance flashed. A Zanpakut descended from the skies, inserting itself into the hill of blades. Exceeding Ailin's expectations, the level where Suzumebaki manifested was actually the same as those few Zanpakut that had attained Bankai. Oh! Ailin walked over and grasped Suzumebaki's hilt. A few seconds later, a smile emerged on his face. What a huge surprise! Infinite Shunpo, Hornet Thunder Whip. Contrary to Ailin's predictions, even the original Shaolin Fon still hadn't trained her personal Zanpakut to Bankai. Yet the Suzumebaki produced within his inner world had already reached Bankai. However, Ailin soon understood. The weapons here originated from his memories. In his memories, Suzumebaki had indeed attained Bankai already. In other words, any Zanpakut Ailin replicated from his memories, even if their Shinigami hadn't completed releasing them yet, as long as they successfully birthed their Zanpakut, what manifested in Ailin's world was their state over 200 years later. Chapter 18, The New Weapon One-Hit Killer, Murasame. This can also be considered my trump card. I can't actually use these Zanpakut in Soul Society. But there are no such restrictions within my inner world. Casting aside his thoughts, Ailin stretched out his right hand and began forging a new weapon. Analyzing design concept. Murasame is a blade of certain death. Any enemy cut by Murasame, even if it's just a scratch, will die. Envisioning basic framework. A slender blade, sharp edges. In the center of the crimson hilt lies a conspicuous white line. Replicating constituent materials. Murasame's materials consist mainly of ultra-dangerous poisons and among the strongest of metals. Imitating production techniques. The ones forging Murasame are the highest-tier craftsmen from that world. Each possesses the utmost mastery, utilizing numerous lost secret arts. Resonating accumulated experience. After Murasame's completion, it has undergone use by countless powerful swordsmen, every one of whom made a grand name for themselves. Reliving years of tempering. The battle experiences of these wielders, honed through endless years, have made Murasame all the more formidable. Especially within Ailin's memories, where that black-haired, crimson-eyed girl had defeated the world's so-called strongest great general. Massive spiritual power converged in Ailin's hands as azure lines spread across the entirety of the blade. Two strands of black Ryutsu flew over from the sword hill, fusing into these lines, slowly spreading to coat the entire sword. These two black Ryutsu strands represented Suzumebaki's ability to hit certain kill. By integrating them into this sword as well, Murasame gained the means for one-hit certain kill. Everything was ready. Complete, transcending the many undertakings. When the azure radiance faded away, within Ailin's hands lay a sword longer than the average Zanpakut. One-hit certain kill, Murasame. Ailin flung this long sword, it spun rapidly with a shrill hum, carving out an arc in midair before finally embedding itself atop the sword hill. Observing its position, it stood even higher than Suzumebaki. What? We can go out. Within the 2nd Division Captain's office, Ailin gazed at Shaolin Fon in shock. Of course. Our 2nd Division has never prohibited personnel leaves. Shaolin Fon looked at Ailin in astonishment as she exaggeratedly asked, could it be that after joining our division for so long, aside from missions you haven't left even once? No one told me about this. Ailin gave a wry laugh. Ever since joining 2nd Division, because of its nature, any Shinigami who didn't arrive at the designated assembly point by the stated time or accept their mission during emergency summons would be charged with dereliction of duty and thrown into the maggot's nest. Thus, in these past 30-odd years, aside from missions, Ailin had always remained within the barracks, fearing that he might miss a summoning order someday. He hadn't expected to learn today from Shaolin Fon about the method for freely leaving the grounds. Ha ha ha, I heard before there was some idiot who stayed in his division for over 10 years without exiting once. Never thought I'd personally see one who lasted over 30 years today, ha ha ha. This is too amusing. Alright, go ahead and laugh if you want. I'm heading out. Alan rolled his eyes at Shaolin Fon bending over in laughter before getting up to leave the captain's office. This time, Alan didn't return to the barracks. Instead, he walked straight out of 2nd Division. 3 years had passed since Shaolin Fon challenged Marino Shinmada for his position. After losing to Shaolin Fon, Marino Shinmada chose retirement over continuing as 4th seat. However, he did get his son Mareki Yomada into 2nd Division to learn under Alan. The scent of freedom. Stepping past 2nd Division's gates, Alan felt his heart and lungs expand tremendously. Who knows how he survived all these years? Nonetheless, caution was still warranted for his first venture outside. Alan swiftly estimated the time within his mind, flickering away after a few shunpo steps. Whoosh! 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 Emergency summons lasted 1 minute. 2nd Division's rule was to assemble before emergency summons ended. Thus, those who stayed in 2nd Division for a period generally knew some loopholes for leaving the grounds. Usually, everyone would test how far they could shunpo at full speed within 1 minute. This distance was the range they could freely move about outside 2nd Division. The faster one's shunpo, the greater their range of activity. Take for example 2nd Division's captain Yuryuki Shion. With her shunpo, 1 minute easily allowed crossing Seoul Society 4th and Baek. If she used shunk as well, practically all of Seoul Society, even parts of Rukanga, would be safe for Yuryuki. Of course, as 2nd Division's captain, unless Central 46 or the captain commander personally assigned Yuryuki missions, her occasional absences generally posed no problems. Alan and the others could handle the regular tasks anyway. This sort of loophole for leaving the grounds would be learned by most after 2 to 3 years in 2nd Division. Since everyone interacted daily, occasional group outings outside weren't rare happenings. After a few times, even without explicit mention, the matter's subtleties were implicitly understood. Only Alan, due to poorer aptitude initially, had devoted himself wholly towards training to enhance his strength and alleviate his sense of danger. By the time Alan grew powerful, as 2nd Division's vice-captain and someone who stayed over 30 years in the division, everyone assumed Alan already knew about this trick. Coupled with Alan's constant seclusion aside from missions, no one bothered to tell him either. If not for today's idle chatter with Shaolin Fon inside the captain's office, who knows how much longer it'd have taken Alan to find out. Whoosh! Alan's figure appeared atop a small mountain's peak. 50 paces, this distance should be fine. Although his maximum was 60 paces, Alan didn't actually utilize the full 60 paces as his everyday range of activity, leaving 10 paces worth as buffer for unexpected situations. Glancing back from this peak, Alan finally noticed his radius, with 2nd Division as center, practically encompassed half of Seoul Society already. Very good. Like this, I can move freely within this radius. As long as I encounter 4 to 5 captain-level experts within this range, I can break through into the captain-level Ryutsu realm. Currently, Alan's Ryutsu was almost the same as Marino Shinmada's after releasing his Zanpakut. He only needed to forge 4 more captain-class Zanpakut for his Ryutsu to thoroughly advance into the captain level. By then, Alan's innate realm unlimited blade works could truly be unleashed by him. Chapter 19, Encounter. Alan's Zanpakut was unlimited blade works. Because it was his inner world, and Alan himself knew the true name and function of this ability, as long as Alan's Ryutsu reached the level where he could materialize his inner world, which was captain-level Ryutsu, he would be able to unleash his Bankai, unlimited blade works. That would be when Alan could fully utilize his strength. Admittedly, due to some special reason in Seoul Society, they did not allow 2 identical Zanpakut to exist at the same time. But Alan's Bankai, unlimited blade works, it could erode the real world with his inner world, tear apart and create a new space from the real world. This space and Seoul Society could be considered as 2 worlds. By then, Alan only needed to pull his enemies into his inner world. Inside his own world, Alan would be able to use all the Zanpakut. What Alan needed to do was kill the enemies pulled into his inner world, and prevent the information of his Bankai from leaking. In the past, Alan could only move within the area of the 2nd Division. Now that he knew the loophole for leaving, Alan's range of activity had suddenly expanded by thousands of times, practically encompassing half of Siritii. Well then, captains of the Godi 13, let's have a pleasant encounter. A few breaths later, Aelin left the tranquil mountain peak and came to the bustling commercial street. The area I can currently move around has the 3rd Division, 5th Division, 8th Division, 10th Division, 13th Division. Among these divisions, the captain class powerhouses are Tenjiro Kirin-J, Shinji Hirako, Sosuke Aizen, Shunsui Kiraku, Shiba Ishin, and Jushiro Yukitake, a total of 6 people. As for the others, I can only rely on luck to meet them on the street. However, I remember that the captain of the 8th Division, Shunsui Kiraku, has always liked drinking in izakayas and brothels. For now, get familiar with the izakayas and brothels in this part of the commercial district. As expected, Aelin did not meet any captain that day. But he didn't come away empty-handed either. There were 5 more lieutenant-class Zanpakuto. As for the Zanpakuto of ordinary Shinigami, there were over 100 more. Forging these Zanpakuto boosted Aelin's Rasetsu a bit more. Cheers! Inside the Moonlight Tavern, Aelin sat at the same table with a girl wearing her smooth long hair in a spiky bun and haphazard makeup on her face. On the table, aside from some snacks, there were all kinds of drinks. Cheers! Clink! The 2 glasses collided, spilling some of the wine inside due to the impact, but this did not affect the mood of the 2 drinking buddies at all. Gulp gulp! Ah! After a period of investigation, Aelin was still unwilling to let his guard down and visit the brothels, choosing instead to drink in the tavern. Unfortunately, perhaps Aelin was unlucky. After a few months, he still hadn't met any captains in this tavern. Aelin was about to switch to another tavern, but a few days ago, a girl who suddenly broke into this tavern forcibly made Aelin stay in this tavern for another month. How to put it, the moment Aelin saw this girl, he knew that if something happened to her in this tavern and it was discovered later that he was also present in this tavern but did nothing, Aelin would most likely get into big trouble. As the vice-captain of the 2nd Division, Aelin handled a lot of intelligence every day. Although the girl had tied her smooth long hair into a spiky bun and put on messy makeup on her face, Aelin recognized her at first glance. She was Haruko Kukaki, the young daughter of the current Kukaki family head. Although he didn't know why the little princess of the Kukaki family would dress like this and come to a tavern far from the 6th Division, Aelin could not let anything happen to this girl right in front of him. So Aelin invited Haruko Kukaki to sit at his table before anyone else. Afterwards, Aelin could feel the tension and worry in the heart of the girl who had entered the tavern for the first time. It took a good while for her to slowly calm down, curiosity taking over. But after all, she was still a little shy. Aside from whispering a thank you to Aelin, she kept her head lowered while tasting the wine. On every subsequent day, the girl would take the initiative to sit at Aelin's table. The 2 didn't have much communication, just tacitly drinking a little wine and eating some snacks. When they felt like it, they would occasionally clink glasses. After a month, the total exchange between them didn't exceed 35 sentences. What made Aelin curious was that the girl was very proactive today. They had already clinked glasses 3 times. I won't come any more starting tomorrow. Thank you for your shelter during this period. When she was leaving, Haruko Kukaki bowed to Aelin in thanks. At this moment, even with the mismatching hairstyle and makeup, Haruko Kukaki exhibited the upbringing of a distinguished clan. Just looking at her manners, no one would think such a refined existence would appear in a tavern. After Haruko Kukaki left, Aelin sighed. He finished the wine in his cup in one gulp, settled the bill, and followed behind her. During that month, it was Aelin secretly escorting Haruko Kukaki home every time. On the way, Haruko Kukaki's appearance would undergo some changes at every corner. The bun on her head scattered, the rebellious spiky hairstyle turned into smooth, waist-length hair. The exaggerated makeup on her face was swiftly wiped off, restoring an elegant subtlety. The gaudy clothes were discarded, revealing a pure white kimono inside. After just a few corners, a girl impulse and rebellious had turned into a gentle, Yamato Nadeshiko-like woman, exuding tremendous feminine charm. The first time Aelin sent Haruko Kukaki back, he was so shocked that his eyeballs almost fell out. After watching Haruko Kukaki enter the gates of the Kukaki residence, Aelin was about to return. The distance from the 6th Division to the 2nd Division had already exceeded Aelin's safe range. If an emergency order was encountered at this time, Aelin's situation would be very dangerous. However, who's there? Resting his hand on his Zanpakuto by his waist, Aelin shouted coldly into the depths of the alley. Aelin never expected that on the last night after escorting Haruko Kukaki back, he would actually encounter enemies. Such powerful killing intent. Thud 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 thud. Footsteps sounded as two sets of footsteps entered Alan's ears. When these two people walked from the darkness into the moonlight and were seen by Alan, his pupils suddenly contracted. Damn it! He had actually met these two at such a time. One had white hair and beard, looking about the same age as Captain Commander Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto. He wore a white captain's haori. The other wore black Shinigami attire, a pair of eyes burning with fury, seemingly wanting to incinerate Alan. Chapter 20, Keiga Kukaki. These two, one is the current head of the Kukaki family and captain of the 6th Division, Jinrei Kukaki. The other is the current captain of the 1st Division's Special Forces, newly appointed 3rd seat of the 1st Division after previous Captain Shinetsu Kisaragi's death, Keiga Hoshino. Also the future son-in-law of the Kukaki family and husband of Haruko Kukaki. Judging from Haruko Kukaki's behavior today, Keiga and Haruko will likely become engaged tonight. Of course, if they had met under normal circumstances, the two parties would at most greet each other out of mutual respect as fellow Godai 13 members. But now, the situation was as if Alan had been caught in the act of stalking the Kukaki family's young lady by her own father and fiancé. In their eyes, Alan had already been labeled with negative tags like pervert, disgusting, and wart. 2nd Division Vice Captain Alan, at your service, Captain Kukaki. Oh. Alan's self-introduction caused Jinrei Kukaki's brows to furrow. I remember the 2nd Division's vice captain took office 5 years ago. However, instead of attending to your duties, Vice Captain Alan, you were sneakily tailing my daughter. Please give me a reasonable explanation, otherwise I will personally apprehend you and go to Captain Yuruaki Shion of the 2nd Division to inquire whether my Kukaki family is under the 2nd Division's surveillance. This is... Hearing Jinrei Kukaki's words, Alan was struck speechless. What could he say? Let alone mentioning that Alan had escorted the Kukaki family's young lady back from the tavern, something that damaged the Kukaki family's reputation. Would Jinrei Kukaki and Keiga even believe him? Even if they did believe, to maintain the Kukaki family's prestige, Alan wasn't certain he wouldn't be disposed of by them. Of course, the Kukaki family could also dispose of Haruko Kukaki. But between a perverted stalker and their own daughter, it was obvious who would be the one disposed of. Seeing Alan remain silent, Jinrei Kukaki let out a cold snort, placing his hand on the Zanpakut by his waist. Although he was advanced in years with greatly diminished strength, Jinrei Kukaki hadn't dropped from the captain level at all. Apprehending a mere vice-captain was effortless for someone like him. However, before Jinrei Kukaki could make a move, Keiga behind him spoke up. Kukaki-sama, he is but a disgusting maggot-tailing Lady Haruko. How could someone like him dirty your hands? Why don't you let me take care of this on your behalf and capture him? This was likely the proudest time of Keiga life. 5 years ago, after the 1st Division's Special Forces Captain Shinetsu Kisaragi attacked the Captain Commander and was personally slain by Captain Commander Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto, Keiga became the new Special Forces Captain. That wasn't all. Due to his handsome looks and powerful strength, Keiga had also caught the eye of 6th Division Captain Jinrei Kukaki. Afterwards, under Captain Commander Yamamoto's arrangements, Jinrei Kukaki and Keiga had grown quite close through frequent interactions. As the leaders of the 4 great noble clans, the Kukaki family had entered an awkward situation in the last century. Jinrei Kukaki was already of advanced age, his time possibly ending in the next 20 to 50 years. His eldest son, Shun Kukaki, though gifted, had poor health. After following Jinrei Kukaki in cultivation for hundreds of years, despite currently being the 6th Division's vice-captain, without Jinrei Kukaki's suppression, Shun might not even last a few days before being challenged and removed from his post. His eldest daughter, Haruko Kukaki, was Jinrei Kukaki's beloved. But she had just been born 20 years ago. Although healthy, her Shinigami talents were pathetic, utterly unable to become a Shinigami. In contrast, his eldest grandson, Byakuya Kukaki, possessed outstanding talents, robust health, and would definitely grow into the Kukaki family's pillar in the future. However, time was running out. Jinrei Kukaki knew that at most, he only had 30 to 50 years left. In that time, Byakuya would at most grow to vice-captain level. Becoming a true captain-class powerhouse required at least 50 to 100 more years. Without a pillar during that period, how could the Kukaki family continue being the role model for Siraidi's nobility? Otherwise, when the time came, the other major noble clans would surely swarm over and devour the Kukaki family. Thus, while he still lived, Jinrei Kokaki wanted to find a new pillar for the Kokaki family. Coincidentally, his daughter had just come of age and he could consider finding a son-in-law. After much deliberation, Keiga became Jinrei Kokaki's final choice. Naturally, Keiga understood all this perfectly clearly. Of course, Keiga himself was also willing. In the first division, Keiga was already at the peak. The position of first division captain wouldn't fall to him even if Captain Commander Yamamoto retired. Keiga was self-aware of that. As for first division's vice-captain position, others might not know, but as someone from the same division, Keiga was deeply aware of that man's power. The master of lightning and strongest/type Zanpakuto, Gonryomaru. Just his Rasetsu surpassed most captains. More importantly, Keiga profoundly understood the absolute trust Captain Commander Yamamoto had in his vice-captain, Chijiro Sasakaibe. Even if he managed to defeat Chijiro Sasakaibe through challenge one day, he would never become First Division's vice-captain. First Division's third seat was the limit for everyone in First Division. But things would be different in the 6th Division. In the 6th Division, Jinrei Kokaki was getting on in years while Shun Kokaki was a good-for-nothing. If he successfully married into the Kokaki family, then after Jinrei Kokaki died, whether it was 6th Division's captain position or Kokaki family head, wouldn't it all be his, Keiga's? Haruko Kokaki was to be his wife in the future. How could he let someone as filthy as Ailen covet her? Thus, compared to Jinrei Kokaki, Keiga was even more eager to make a move against Ailen. His words made Jinrei Kokaki halt his actions. Very well, I'll leave it to you then, Keiga. I will definitely not disappoint Kokaki-sama. Keiga respectfully bowed to Jinrei Kokaki. Moreover, he addressed himself as just Keiga too. Because once he successfully married into the Kokaki family, he would have to abandon his original surname and change it to Kokaki. By then, he would no longer be Keiga Hoshino, but would become Keiga Kokaki. Stepping before Jinrei Kokaki's front after a few strides, killing intent filled Keiga's gaze towards Ailen. Whoosh! Keiga's figure flashed like lightning, instantly appearing before Ailen as his Zanpakuto slashed down at Ailen. Clang! Ailen drew his sword in an instant to block Keiga's strike. Chapter 21, Whisper, Muramasa. Whoosh! Whoosh! Clang clang clang! The sounds of swords clashing continued endlessly at the gate of the Kokaki family residence as two figures flickered about. With this first move, Keiga didn't hold back at all. He was determined to kill Ailen right here. Facing Keiga's attacks, Ailen also focused his mind completely to deal with them. The battle at the gate of the Kokaki family residence soon attracted many people's attention. Especially members of the 6th, 7th, and 10th divisions, who rushed over at lightning speed. The family head of the Kokaki family was the captain of the 6th division. Adding to that, the 6th division barracks weren't far from the Kokaki residence either. Upon sensing the spiritual pressure from the battle here, the Shinigami of the 6th division swiftly gathered. The 7th division was the inner court guard, mainly responsible for maintaining law and order in noble residences. A battle breaking out at the Kokaki residence was something they had to step in to resolve. The 10th division was the patrol corps. Any unlawful or irregular happenings in all of Seoul society were handled by the 10th division, making arrests. The battle between Ailen and Keiga could already be considered the strongest clash below captain class since the assassination attempt on Captain Commander Genrisai Ishigakuni Yamamoto 5 years ago. It was also the most severe incident in Seoul society since then. Captain Kokaki! Captain Kokaki! The fastest to arrive were members of the 6th division, the closest to the Kokaki residence. They swiftly gathered around Jinrei Kokaki, drawing their Zanpakuto to protect him in their center. With their strength, they could barely make out the figures of Ailen and Keiga. If they were to face either one, they might be killed in an instant. Yet despite so, not one of them retreated or tried to place their own captain at the forefront. All right, all of you stand behind me. Such a battle isn't something you can participate in. Fortunately, Jinrei Kokaki wasn't a malicious captain. Knowing these squad members wouldn't accomplish anything and only serve to deplete the enemy's strength, he had them stand behind him. By the time the members of the 6th division had all stood behind Jinrei Kokaki, the 7th division and 10th division members had arrived too. Captain Kokaki, may I ask who these two are? The captain of the 7th division was a middle-aged male with hair resembling a yellow sea star. His entire being appeared rather stern. Love Aikawa. Upon rushing to the Kokaki residence, Love Aikawa first inquired Jinrei Kokaki about the current situation. The two currently battling are 1st Division 3rd Seat Keiga and 2nd Division Vice Captain Ailen. Jinrei Kokaki nodded at Love Aikawa, explaining to him what he saw. Today, I had invited 3rd Seat Keiga to my residence as a guest. By coincidence, we encountered this 2nd Division Vice Captain tailing my daughter. 3rd Seat Keiga then made a move to capture him on my behalf. After listening, Love Aikawa stroked his bearded chin. I see, then we only need to wait for the battle to end. Generally, there was a huge disparity between a 3rd seat and vice captain. After all, the vice captain could be said to be the number 2 figure in a division, the strongest aside from the captain. But if this 3rd seat came from the 1st division, then that would carry far more weight compared to other divisions. Among the 13 divisions, only captains had the qualifications to wear a white captain's Heiori. Other Shinigami could only wear the black Shiakush. But in the 1st division, Chijiro Sasakaibe, the vice captain, was the only one who wore a white Shiakush altered from a captain's Heiori. Although Chijiro Sasakaibe kept a very low profile, his strength actually surpassed most captains. The 1st division's 3rd seat was basically on the same level as vice captains of other divisions. However, what Love Aikawa didn't notice was that Jinrei Kokaki clearly fell silent after he spoke those words. With their level of strength, naturally they could easily make out the battle situation between Ailen and Keiga. From the current scenario, Keiga was evenly matched with Ailen. No, it should be said, as the battle progressed, Keiga was instead being suppressed by Ailen. Because the battlefield was at the gate of the Kokaki residence, neither Ailen nor Keiga had used Kid, only engaging in a contest of swordsmanship and shunpo. In terms of spiritual pressure alone, Keiga was above Ailen. But in a battle between Shinigami, when the disparity in spiritual pressure hadn't reached a qualitative change, a Shinigami's Zanjutsu, Ho, and Kid could provide great enhancements to their overall strength. Compared to ordinary people, Keiga's Zanjutsu and shunpo were pretty good. But, Ailen possessed the experiences of 4 captain-class powerhouses, Shinetsu Kisaragi, Yoryuki Shion, Kisokura Hara, and Suzumebachi from 200 years later. Shinetsu Kisaragi's swordsmanship, Yoryuki Shion's shunpo, Kisokura Hara's Kid and Suzumebachi's Hakuda. If not for Keiga's greater spiritual pressure providing superior overall enhancements, he would have been defeated by Ailen long ago. Love Aikawa assumed the one gaining the upper hand, Ailen, was the 1st division's 3rd seat, which was why he said they only needed to wait for the battle's end. But Jinrei Kokaki knew that the one at a disadvantage was actually the true 1st division 3rd seat. At this time though, he couldn't say anything more. If he denied it verbally, it would mean implying Keiga was inferior to Ailen. How could Keiga accept that? At this moment, Jinrei Kokaki's evaluation of Keiga lowered by quite a bit without him realizing it. Indeed, judging purely by Zanpakuto abilities, Keiga's could be said to be the strongest. He was absolutely the nemesis of most Shinigami. But a Shinigami's strength wasn't comprised solely of Zanpakuto abilities. Keiga very clearly relied too much on his Zanpakuto's capabilities, neglecting cultivation in other areas. If his opponent was a Shinigami, Keiga would have a huge advantage. But beyond Soul Society, a Shinigami's enemies also included hollows from Hueco Mundo as well as Quincy remnants from the Wandenreich 1,000 years ago. When facing powerful entities among hollows and Quincies, Keiga's Zanpakuto abilities would be useless. Just look at now. Although Jinrei Kokaki didn't have a good impression towards Ailen, that didn't prevent his insight. Other than slightly weaker spiritual pressure, this 2nd division vice captain's Zanjutsu and shunpo weren't inferior even among captains. Damn it! Although battling Ailen intensely, Jinrei Kokaki and Love Aikawa's conversation entered both Ailen and Keiga's ears. Being looked down upon by others, how could someone as prideful as Keiga endure it? Following his clash with Ailen where he was sent flying back by a sword strike, Keiga directly released his Zanpakuto. Whisper, Muramasa. Boom! Tremendous spiritual pressure erupted from Keiga's body. At the same time, a wave of purple spiritual pressure spread from Keiga's sword towards Ailen. What is this? When this wave of purple spiritual pressure spread to Ailen's body, he suddenly felt that he had lost control of his Zanpakuto, Tessugah, in his hand. No, not only had he lost control, but this Tessugah was actually controlling Ailen's right hand holding the sword, slashing towards Ailen's own neck. Chapter 22, Suppression. This is. Feeling that he had lost control of his right hand, Ailen's left hand was the first to light up with lightning. Head number 11, Bound Lightning. Crackle. A bolt of lightning shot out from Ailen's left hand, striking Tessugah. Ah! This bolt of lightning spread along Tessaga to Aelin's body. After Aelin let out a muffled grunt, his right hand released Tessaga, regaining control of his right hand. Clang! Looking at Tessaga fallen on the ground, Aelin's gaze towards Keiga Kokaki contained surprise, wariness, and also pleasant surprise. He was surprised that the weapon he had forged would actually be controlled by Keiga's Muramasa like a Zanpakut. He felt wary because with the hundreds of Zanpakut Aelin possessed, if Muramasa truly entered his inner world, it would likely bring tremendous trouble for Aelin. The pleasant surprise was for the same reason. Muramasa had already been copied by Aelin. Once Aelin forged Muramasa, with its ability he could truly have an army of one. However, all that would have to wait until Aelin was safe. Humph! Although the desired effect wasn't achieved, destroying Aelin's Zanpakut with one strike still brought a smug look to Keiga's face. In his eyes, his ability was the strongest. Surrender. If you accept judgment afterwards you might still keep your life. Pointing his released Muramasa at Aelin, Keiga uttered unbelievable nonsense. Spare Aelin? How was that possible? Haruko Kokaki had disguised herself when entering the tavern, but that was only an external disguise. Her spiritual pressure had never changed at all. Investigating only required tracing Haruko Kokaki's spiritual pressure to understand everything. Relying solely on personal assumptions without seeking the facts yet pressing such a weighty title on me, I really cannot accept this. As for you saying your next strike will take my life, since when could a third seat be so arrogant when speaking to a vice-captain? Aelin was deliberately provoking him. Indeed, in terms of status a third seat was in no way comparable to a vice-captain. But the first division was an exception. Although this was something everyone tacitly agreed on without voicing it aloud. So there was nothing wrong with Aelin saying this. Even if this third seat came from the first division, he was still only a third seat. Damn you! As expected, Keiga was instantly enraged by Aelin's words, flickering towards Aelin as a blur. Projection. Seeing Keiga make his move, Aelin loudly roared as he released his Zanpakut. Boom! In an instant, Aelin's spiritual pressure surged by 5 times, reaching the level of a captain. Although there was still a huge gap compared to Keiga, their spiritual pressures were finally within the same realm. With a wave of his hand, azure radiance converged before Aelin. In an instant, dozens of Zanpakut emerged amidst the radiance. Phantasm break! Whoosh! 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 Azure lines spread across the blades of these dozens of Zanpakut, transforming into rows of arrow bolts shooting towards Keiga. Boom! 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 Facing the incoming Zanpakut, Keiga swung Muramasa in his hand. The purple aura around Muramasa instantly enveloped those approaching Zanpakut. But to Keiga's shock, these dozens of Zanpakut didn't have any spirits. Keiga's Zanpakut Muramasa could control a Shinigami's Zanpakut because Muramasa possessed the ability to communicate with other Zanpakut spirits. Moreover, in Bankai, Muramasa could even enter a Shinigami's inner world, incite the Zanpakut spirit to defect and directly control the Zanpakut spirit, forcing the manifested Zanpakut to serve him instead. Humph! Seeing Keiga's actions, Aelin let out a cold laugh. To deal with Keiga's Muramasa, the Zanpakut Aelin unleashed this time weren't the actual items from within his reality marble but were projections generated through using his Zanpakut's Shikai ability instead. After releasing his true Zanpakut abilities, all weapons inside Aelin's reality marble could be projected outside through consuming spiritual power. Being just projections, the power of these Zanpakut was weaker compared to the real things inside his reality marble. However, aside from projection, Aelin possessed another ability too. Phantasm break. This ability could greatly boost the might of projected weapons at the cost of damaging them. Although only a one-shot power-up, that one strike's power could already match the real things. Furthermore, as mere Zanpakut projections, there were no actual spirits within them at all, completely immune against the effects of Keiga's Zanpakut ability. Having lost the initiative, Keiga could only wave Muramasa to deflect these dozens of incoming Zanpakut. But... boom! 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 The instant these Zanpakut were struck by Keiga, violent explosions occurred on all of them. Every Zanpakut's detonation wasn't the least bit inferior to a lieutenant class head number 31, shot of red fire. Whoosh! Amidst the surging flames a figure shot into the sky. The 3 captain class experts, Jinrei Kokaki, Love Akawa, and Ishin Shiba raised their heads. The other Shinigami were slightly slower to react but still followed their gazes towards that figure hovering in midair. You're kidding, right? He's actually injured despite being from the 1st Division's 3rd seat. So powerful, both these guys are truly so powerful. Suspended roughly 20 plus meters above ground, Kaga's body was shrouded by large amounts of black fumes, with multiple burns visible on his hands and body. Even his shiakusho had a few holes punctured through. There was also a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. Very good, you've truly angered me now. After wiping the blood from his mouth, Kaga glanced at the 3 captains dressed in white heiris on the ground and the more than 50 Shinigami present. His eyes brimmed with viciousness. I can't control your weapons, but can I still not control these people instead? The Zanpakuto of 3 captain class experts plus over 50 Shinigami manifested. Let's see how you die. Bankai Mukjai Shmuramasa. Chapter 23, Fierce Battle. Soul Society's greatest and final technique that a Shinigami possesses is the final release of their Zanpakuto, Bankai. After releasing Bankai, at the very least, a Shinigami's Ryoryoku would surge by 5 to 10 times. In addition, the Shinigami would be able to completely control and utilize all the abilities of their Zanpakuto. The might of Bankai corresponds with the difficulty in attaining it. Among the entire 13 divisions of the Godai 13, according to publicly available information, only the 13 captains were capable of achieving Bankai. In the nearly 2,000 years of peace in Soul Society, Captain Commander Yamamoto had issued an edict to maintain the safety of Soul Society's residents, prohibiting Captain Class Shinigami and above from releasing their Zanpakuto. Of course, the prohibition on captains releasing their Zanpakuto referred specifically to prohibiting captains from using Bankai. The disparity between a captain's Ryoryoku and those below captain class was too massive. If captains fully unleashed their Ryoryoku, even vice-captains would be caught up within 3 kilometers. Bankai allowed captains to increase their Ryoryoku by 5 to 10 times. If 2 captain class fighters using Bankai battled, aside from other captains, all Shinigami within 5 kilometers would be in mortal danger. Ailin had never expected that Kaga Kukaki would actually dare violate Captain Commander Yamamoto's edict and use Bankai within Soul Society. However, to Ailin's relief, the purple-haired, gloomy man that appeared beside Kaga didn't stretch his long-nailed hand towards Ailin, but to the Shinigami spectating from the other side instead. Kaga, how dare you? Among them, only Jinrei Kukaki knew Kaga's Zanpakuto's true abilities. But even he hadn't expected that Kaga would actually dare use this ability against them. Quick, hurry and seal your inner worlds. Facing Kaga's ability, after saying just that, Jinrei Kukaki immediately closed his eyes, entering his inner world and sealing it shut. But Jinrei Kukaki's warning was clearly too late. How can this be? Before these Shinigami sensed anything else, wisps of bizarre Ryoryoku left their bodies, condensing into figures gripping Zanpakuto or other humanoid beings. What is going on? Those whose Ryoryoku had condensed into shadowy figures didn't know what they were. After all, they hadn't fully communed with their Zanpakuto yet. But those who saw distinct familiar forms taking shape from their bodies' Ryoryoku were shocked speechless. These were the manifestations of their Zanpakuto spirits. How had they left their inner worlds? Hey Tengumaru, what are you doing? Injetsu. Nunch, why have you come out? In that instant, the Shinigami who recognized their Zanpakuto spirits hurriedly tried communicating. But to their dismay, their calls were completely ignored as these Zanpakuto spirits turned into blurs shooting towards Ailin. Projection. Facing the incoming barrage, Ailin didn't dare be negligent either. Zanpakuto emerged before Ailin. Aside from those stabbed into Sword Hill, practically every single blade from his reality marble was projected out. The dense mass of hundreds of blades hovering overhead left all present Shinigami breathless. Retreat, everyone get away from here. This is beyond your capabilities, leave quickly. Witnessing this, 10th Division Captain Ishin Shiba stepped forth, drawing his Zanpakuto as he unleashed his Rasetsu to shield the Shinigami behind him, preventing them from losing their will to fight under the pressure of those 2 powerful Rasetsu up ahead. On the other side, 7th Division Captain Love Aikawa swiftly followed suit, ordering his men to retreat first while erupting with Rasetsu as well. Receiving their captain's orders, the Shinigami swiftly fled one by one. In the end, only the arrogant Kaga in the sky, Ailin surrounded by hundreds of blades, the inner world sealing Jinrei Kukaki and the 2 Rasetsu releasing captains, Ishin and Love, remained in this area. The eruption of Captain Class Rasetsu also attracted the attention of most Shinigami in Soul Society. The captains of 2nd Division Yoryuki Shion, 5th Division Shinji Hirako, 8th Division Shunsui Kirikou and 9th Division Kensei Maguruma were all rushing over. Phantasm Break, Massive amounts of Ryuryoku condensed into streams spreading across the blades swirling around Aelin before, with a wave of his hand, they transformed into rows of azure arrows shooting towards the dozens of manifested Zanpakuto spirits. Boom boom! The gates and alleys around the Kokaki residence seemed festooned with endless fireworks. If not for the compound walls being made of Reishi-resistant Sekizeki stones, at least 1/5 of the sprawling Kokaki estate would have collapsed from that barrage. Even then, the opposing alley had been reduced to rubble and debris while several cracks ran along the compound walls now. A few more such attacks and even these Sekizeki walls would crumble. Whoosh! 7 to 8 figures shot out from the flames, the ordinary Shinigami Zanpakuto having been completely annihilated by Aelin's earlier attack. Even among the lieutenant class, several had perished. These Zanpakuto that emerged were those quick enough to release Shikai the moment the explosions occurred. By fortune, they happened to be behind 7th Division Captain Love Aikawa and 10th Division Captain Ishin Shiba, whose powerful Benkai-level Zanpakuto shielded them, allowing their survival. After all, Aelin's were merely projections enhanced by Phantasm Break, still far weaker than real Captain-class Zanpakuto. Relying solely on projected Zanpakuto to bombard Captain-class ones was unrealistic. However, clap! Aelin clapped the hilt guard of his sheathed Zanpakuto, instantly resulting in faint Ryuryoku undulations. Buzz buzz! Sensing these undulations, Tessagá that Aelin had tossed far away earlier suddenly vibrated before transforming into a blur rapidly shooting back into Aelin's grasp. Chapter 24, Flame Tessagá. After creating Kisokura Hera's Beniheim, Aelin modified Tessagá's sheath using Crimson Shield's properties to contain a barrier. In Inuyasha, Tessagá's sheath also had a hidden function allowing its wielder to summon Tessagá after releasing it. Clang! Facing 2 Captain-class Zanpakuto and 7 to 8 Lieutenant-class ones, Aelin felt no fear gripping Tessagá. Rather, he felt extremely excited at finally unleashing his full power. Tessagá! Responding to Aelin's call, the battered sheath shone with dazzling ivory radiance, expanding to over 3 meters long as rich Ryuryoku swirled around the colossal fang. Tessagá's release didn't further raise Aelin's Rasetsu, slightly disappointing him. After all, he had already released his Zanpakuto. Being able to raise his Rasetsu again by releasing another blade meant that just unsealing the Zanpakuto in his reality marble would make his Rasetsu skyrocket. However, Aelin discovered that under his Zanpakuto's released state, unleashing other weapons and utilizing their secret technique consumed only 1/10 as much Ryuryoku. What this represented was obvious. The Berserk Rasetsu was focused by Aelin into Tessagá, miniature tornadoes swirling along the fang's blade. Then, slashing towards the 7 approaching Zanpakuto spirits, he unleashed Tessagá's strongest technique. Wind Scar. 3 heaven-rending attacks roared forth like tidal waves, drowning his foes. Argh! The 5 lieutenant class were ripped apart by that devastating assault. Smash him, Tengumaru! Love Aikawa's Zanpakuto spirit took the form of a 3-meter-tall muscular male. Facing the incoming attacks, he immediately released Shikai. Boom! Immense Rasetsu erupted from Tengumaru as his cleaver-like Zanpakuto transformed into a gigantic kanab resembling a morning star mace. Scorching Hammer. Flames coiled thickly around the spiked mace as Tengumaru swung it down towards Aelin's attacks. Boom! White shock waves collided with crimson flames, rocketing skywards and dyeing the surroundings red and white. Invisible undulations blasted outwards, fluttering the spectators' robes wildly. The heavy atmosphere left everyone solemn. Things had escalated completely out of hand. Trash! In the skies, Keiga scowled seeing his controlled manifested Zanpakuto spirits get crushed by Aelin after just a single clash. By now, he no longer cared about Captain Commander Yamamoto's edict or Soul Society. His Zanpakuto was the strongest. Yet this damned Aelin seemed to hard counter him completely. Just the fact that his countless later projected Zanpakuto were immune to his control meant that Aelin had to die. Soul Society couldn't tolerate someone with Zanpakuto he couldn't control. Muramasa, I want him to taste utter despair and death in the shortest time possible. As you command, Keiga-sama. After respectfully bowing, Muramasa stretched his right hand towards Aelin. Art of Shadow Bind. The collisions between Windscar and Tengumaruzuji had further damaged the already ravaged buildings here. When the dust settled, 2 figures with powerful Rasetsu walked out from the lingering explosions. Oh! As expected of Captain's Zanpakuto, even Windscar couldn't injure them much. Then, just as Aelin thought of using stronger moves, his entire body seemed bound by countless threads, unable to budge at all. After the initial shock, he soon calmed down with realization. This move, it's Muramasa's power. Although invisible, the protagonist had seen countless threads ensnaring his Zanpakuto and his inner world's reflection. Projection. Over 10 blades emerged around Alan, transforming into a rain of swords hacking at the threads. Clang! 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 With each severed thread, Alan felt lighter. Soon, all constraints had been slashed apart and his freedom restored. Humph, thanks for reminding me. If not for that move, I'd have forgotten who my real opponent was. Glancing skywards, Alan unleashed his Ryatsu. Ryatsu Eruption. After using it to defeat Captain Marino Shinmada, this was Alan's second time. With Ryatsu Eruption, Alan's Ryatsu once more neared Kaga's level. Flame Tessaga. Roar. Responding to his call, Tessaga transformed into a blazing fang exuding scorching flames, the nearby air rippling from the intense heat. Ignoring the two incoming Zanpakuto spirits, Alan unleashed his strongest move towards Kaga. Flame Wind Scar. 3 fiery shock waves tore through the air as if to drown Kaga completely. Damn! Seeing the sky-rending attacks, Kaga's eyes flashed with fear. His ability could greatly diminish almost all Shinigami while adding their Zanpakuto to his forces. But it had no effect against Alan's direct and overbearing assault now. Facing such might, even Kaga could only call for his Zanpakuto spirit mentally. Muramasa. Responding to his wielder's call, Muramasa's body appeared before Kaga, ready to shield him. Muramasa didn't oppose his master's intent at all. As long as Kaga was fine, what did it matter if he was condemned to hell? Thus, aside from unleashing his full power against the triple flaming attacks, Muramasa also commanded Tengumaru and Zangetsu to attack as well. Scorching Hammer. Crescent Moon Rush. Chapter 25, Imprisonment. Boom. No matter if Tengumaru, Zangetsu, or Alan's Flame Tessaga, they all belonged to the fire-type Zanpakuto. After the explosion of spiritual pressure, the power of Alan's Flame Tessaga's Flame Wind Scar had nearly reached that of a captain's Bankai. Meanwhile, Scorching Hammer and Crescent Moon Rush were Tengumaru and Zangetsu's Bankai Ujis respectively. The collision of Ujis from 3 captain-level Bankais directly turned a large portion of Soul Society's sky red. The impacts of the explosions and lingering spiritual pressures blew any Shinigami that wanted to approach here away. Those that could withstand these impacts and head towards the battle center were mostly captain class wearing white Captain Heiris. Boom! A figure rushed out from within the flames, with multiple scorch marks on their body from the fiery explosions. Kaga! Damn it! Shock and fear still lingered within Kaga's eyes but soon converted into boundless killing intent. Indeed, this vice-captain, Alan must die. However, recalling Alan's terrifying earlier strike, Kaga's felt dissatisfaction towards his own Zanpakuto Muramasa for the first time. Why must Muramasa be an illusion-type Zanpakuto? Why couldn't Muramasa unleash such powerful attacks? Why couldn't Muramasa fully protect himself from harm when facing such mighty strikes? Kaga attributed the root cause of all this to his Zanpakuto Muramasa, blaming Muramasa for being too weak. Yet, he forgot that if he hadn't indulged so much in Muramasa's might, working hard to cultivate the 4 Shinigami arts instead, he could have relied on formidable swordsmanship and strikes to clash directly against Alan's earlier assaults, or could have dodged the attacks with superior shunpo, or could have utilized a formidable Bakudo barrier to defend. Without realizing it, as Kaga pushed all responsibility onto his Zanpakuto, their resonance began deteriorating. Under Alan's earlier blow, Muramasa, who wasn't suited for direct confrontation, had been heavily injured. But that didn't prevent Kaga from still utilizing Muramasa's might. After all, Tengumaru and Zangetsu had just used Bankai against Alan, to try destroying his Flame Wind Scar as soon as possible. Muramasa wasn't suited for direct fights but Tengumaru and Zangetsu were perfect to clash toe-to-toe against any enemy. Right now, Kaga wanted to directly control the Bankai, releasing Tengumaru and Zangetsu to assault Alan. Under 2 captain-class Zanpakuto's attacks, at most 10 breaths would be enough to kill Alan. But that's enough. 3 figures dressed in white Captain Heiris appeared amidst the battlefield. Among them, Yoryuki Shihoan, captain of the 2nd Division, stood between Alan and the 2 Zanpakutos. Jinrei Kukaki, captain of the 6th Division, had also undone his inner world isolation, appearing beside Kaga. Shunsui Kiraku, captain of the 8th Division, stood right in the battle center. It was him who said that's enough. Earlier. In the end, the battle between Keiga and Ailen didn't continue. Moreover, both Keiga and Ailen were detained under the crime of disturbing Soul Society's peace by the personally escorted them to Kensei Meguruma, captain of the 9th Division. Indeed, the 2nd Division and 6th Division both had their own detention centers. However, Ailen was the 2nd Division's vice-captain while Keiga was the honored 1st Division's 3rd seat. No matter which division they were imprisoned at, Yoryuki Shihoan and Jinrei Kukaki worried the other side would make a move. After all, as current heads of Soul Society's 5 great noble clans, their ancestors had done all sorts of things before attaining the honor of 5 great noble clans. There were hardly any good people among nobles. Because the Shiba clan was unwilling to get embroiled with the other 3 clans' shady dealings, they had been secretly targeted by the other 3 families since Soul Society's founding over 1,000 years ago. By now, the Shiba clan was only barely holding on to their nobility in name without any of the actual authority. If not for this generation's Isshin Shiba, it was likely the Shiba clan would still be living in secrecy within the Rukanga slums. Coincidentally, the arrival of 9th Division Captain Kensei Meguruma solved this dilemma for Jinrei Kukaki and Yoryuki Shihoan. Kensei Meguruma was an ordinary Shinigami born in Rukanga who entered the Spiritual Arts Academy, having no ties with nobles at all. As the detention unit, the 9th Division was naturally responsible for imprisoning and guarding inmates anyway. Handing Ailen and Keiga over to the 9th Division eased both sides. Under Kensei Meguruma's lead, Ailen and Keiga were imprisoned within neighboring cells. Humph, consider yourself lucky to be saved by Captain Shunsui this time. Next time, you won't have such fortune. Hearing Keiga's cold snort from the next cell over, Ailen ignored him completely. Although much had transpired today, with Ailen even tarred by labels like lecherous and despicable, his gains weren't small either. First, was having a clear grasp of his current strength. Among current vice-captain tier experts, aside from Chijiro Sasakaibe, he should rank in the top 3. Second, was having coincidentally copied 6 captain class Zanpakutos after his fight, including Jinrei Kukaki of the 6th Division, Love Aikawa of the 7th Division, Shunsui Kiraku of the 8th Division, Kensei Meguruma of the 9th Division, Isshin Shiba of the 10th Division, as well as his opponent, Keiga. Thus, facing Keiga's provocations from the other cell, Ailen utterly ignored him. Indeed, if not for the other captains arriving today while facing Keiga as a true captain class expert alongside 2 captain class Bankai Zanpakutos, Ailen might have really perished. But simultaneously, that would also be the last time he was that powerless. Closing his eyes with his consciousness sinking into his reality marble, Ailen swiftly forged replicas of those Zanpakutos from the information within. With every additional captain class Zanpakuto created, Ailen's spiritual pressure would rise substantially. Thus, by the time rumors of Ailen and Keiga's fight as well as the events leading up to and after began circulating through Soul Society, nobody knew, Ailen's riot soul level had genuinely reached captain class. Moreover, having used Kensei Meguruma's Zanpakuto Tachi Kaze to successfully copy Tessaga's Backlash Wave Oji, he had finally raised his Tessaga to the captain tier as well. At the peak of Sword Hill, or the very center of his reality marble, gazing at the ever-increasing number of weapons atop Sword Hill as well as his reality marble beginning to resemble an arsenal, Ailen swelled with heroic spirit for a time. This would be his greatest asset in this world. Slowly approaching towards that sinister purple blade, Ailen extended a hand gripping that Zanpakuto's hilt. Demonic Blade Muramasa.
Thanks for listening.